evening and welcome to the March 8th, 2021 meeting of Wakefield Town Council. I'm calling this meeting to order. If we can begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll note for the record that all members of the Town Council are in attendance. Moving on to item number 4, public engagement. I know we've had 2 people reach out to us to speak tonight. The first is Julie Scott. The second is Bill Conley. And I would just remind both members to identify yourselves, give your address before you speak, and then you'll be held to 3 minutes. The council may or may not engage with you, but we will certainly take your comments, and thank you for making them. Julie, whenever you'd like to begin.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Oh, great. Okay, I will get started. My name is Julie Scott. I'm a resident of 226 Main Street. I'm a member of Friends of Lake Quannapowitt and WCNA, but I'm not representing either group with my comments tonight. I'm speaking in regard to your agenda item number 11, licenses Part B, Boston Outdoor Recreation. I started communicating with Town Hall in regard to the boat rental aesthetic issue in the fall of 2019. It was in January or February of 2020 that I received some fabulous news. Some of the materials historically housed for 12 months on the common, while only being used for the 3 months of the year, were removed from the common area partly in response to my concerns. Then the pandemic came and closed the rental last summer. This afternoon, I emailed the Town Hall and Council members a list of my 7 concerns, so I will not get into those tonight. After tonight, though, I do hope that there is a look taken into the use of the bench policy. In doing so, citizens would gain access to a broad discussion on ways to provide this recreational service so that the environment of the common, or wherever a service like this is provided, is nothing but enhanced. We do already have existing boat launches on the lake. In addition, companies such as REI and LL Bean deliver and remove paddle boards and other floating recreational devices on a daily basis as part of their business plan. I like the thought of daily delivery and removal, and I hope it's something that we at least look into as part of a broader discussion on this topic in the near future. Over the years, I have been concerned about the privately operated boat rental on the common. To be clear, I am not against non-motorized boating on the lake. But when you look at this rented area when in operation in the summer, and you compare it to the beautiful parks found on the right and left of it, the rented area to me seems to be a thorn between 2 roses. It does not meet the high standard that the town and various nonprofit groups have set for our green spaces. The boating has typically operated from the end of May to Labor Day. The other 9 months, visitors and townsfolk are left to look at stored privately owned boating materials and furniture. I am so glad that Town Hall heard my concerns a year ago, and some of the items were removed, and I thank them for that. Our town parks and fields are points of tremendous pride. Lease agreements involving public land, if they are to continue, should include minimal footprints and specific requirements to meet high standards of maintenance. This rental area has been active for over 12 years, yet it's only actually used for only 3 months of each of those years. Items owned by a private company have been stored there for 12 months in each year. Taxpayers expect that this lakeside park area be at its physical best for all to use and enjoy for 365 days a year. The 12 months of unnecessary clutter on our beautiful common is not attractive. Materials not owned by the town or an approved nonprofit group should be stored elsewhere. The area should be safe for children and respected for its beauty so that it can be enjoyed for all 12 months of the year. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Julie. Right under 3 minutes, too.
I timed it.
Yeah, I can tell. Perfectly done. Thank you. Bill, was Bill Conley speaking?
He did send an email for public participation. I don't know if he was going to be on. I don't see him. It's a very short email, and he just said that he hopes that he was speaking on behalf of the Friends of Lake Quannapowitt. Sure. And hopes that the relicensing of the waterfront activities would be conducted using the new policy for installation around the lake that creates a time period after the request and before final approval for further public input and discussion.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. All right, moving on to item number 5. We have a COVID-19 update. So I assume, Steve, this will go right to Ruth first?
Yes, Ruth is here. So, and then
Excellent.
Tom Walsh.
Great. All set, Ruth.
Okay, thanks, Ann, and thank you for the members of the board. Well, let's see, not a lot of new news. Our numbers are unfortunately creeping back up again. I know the last time I was here, I was able to say that they were going down on a weekly basis. This past week, we had 48 cases. The week before that, 44 cases. The week before that, 38 cases. And that's been our low point for quite some time. So we're unfortunately trending in the wrong direction. We are seeing a lot of large groups in town, in restaurants, other places, and besides one youth, high school youth team that contributed greatly to those numbers, the rest are not a particular cluster, except for that one cluster that actually had 13. So it is great, and more people are getting immunized, which is excellent. And I know that the CDC guidance came out today with some information for people who have been fully vaccinated, but it is not a get out of jail card. And I certainly understand, empathize, sympathize. Everybody is tired of the restrictions, tired of the pandemic, clearly. But the way to make this shorter is to hang in there a little longer with social distancing and mask wearing. Going back out into large crowds is just going to prolong the pandemic. And we're really on a good path to keep going. We have our last vaccination clinic a week from Friday at the Converse Center, which are the second doses for our people 75 and older. And then, as you know, the state has decided not to use local health departments anymore. So we'll be finishing off the housing authority and finishing homebound people. So if you have not made yourself known to us, please call us at the Wakefield Health Department, 781-246-6375, and let us know, because we are actively putting lists together. We need to do them in groups of 10 because of the vaccine. And then we're sending out teams to do 10 a day, and send out another team. So really within the next 2 weeks, all right, don't count, if you want to count this week, 3 weeks, really we should have reached all of our homebound and housing authority people, and we'll have completed our second doses. So that's all good.
Great. Tom, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, we just, the past week, we've just been taking care of the facility. Last week, we had the call takers in there registering the people for the last clinic that we're going to have. MEMA also let us put an order in. We got some PPE in, gave it to the fire department, along with some hand sanitizer and some wipes, which was pretty nice. Other than that, we're business as usual, and working on reimbursements for the town right now.
Great. I just want to say, if I may, Madam Chair, that the team that put on these vaccines, these clinics, did just an absolutely fabulous job. And it is unfortunate that the state did decide to go in a different direction. And even in looking at their numbers of how many vaccines came through, health departments and regional health clinics, that was a pretty hefty number in there overall. So kind of made no sense to me, but great job by Ruth and Tom and their team. And I guarantee you the people are not going to get the personal service that they got here, which is too bad. But hey, we did what we could, and we'll see what happens. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Do any members of the council have questions for either Ruth or Tom? Jonathan.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. I assume, at least for the individuals who we know of who are homebound, we've made outbound calls to those folks around getting vaccines.
Correct.
Great. So it's just, anyone that we don't know about, we want to make sure that they call in so we can serve them.
Right. We have a list from our Council on Aging. We have a list from Mystic Valley Elder Services. We have people that we normally give homebound flu shots to.
Great. Okay.
And now we're using this kind of forum to let anybody else know that, we're available.
Okay. And do you have roughly how many homebound vaccinations have we been able to do so far?
We're kind of combining it with Melrose right now. So we've just started doing homebound, and then we're going to be doing at least 1 or 2 days next week, working with our volunteer coordinator, Rick Stinson. Mm-hmm. So he's lining up the volunteers, and on whatever days he can put the teams together, we have the vaccine and the list. It's really not actually a very long list for Wakefield. So we can do it in 2 or 3 days.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much again for everything, that you and your team have done. It's continues to be extraordinary, and really appreciate everything that's gone in now over the last a year, which is scary to think about too.
Thanks. It's a great team. Excellent team.
Thanks, Jonathan. Maureen and then Ed.
Just to echo a little bit what Jonathan said, Ruth and Tom and Steve, just great job. It's been so well done, and it's a little sad that it's not going to continue at this moment. I just had a question, and I lost track, and I should know, but what is the latest governor's order, like what on gathering? Is it still under 10 outside? I mean, I just think because I lost track, and I think if that's, if large gatherings, and I know people can eat inside restaurants now and go to casinos and go to arcades and all of that, but I think is the rule still there that you shouldn't really be having more than 10 people inside your house or outside your house?
So the rules are tentatively changing on March 22nd. People aren't hearing the tentative part of that. It's based on how our numbers are doing. Mm-hmm. So it's not a guarantee, and it's 100 indoors, 200, I think it's 200 outdoors, definitely 100 indoors. But what he didn't say was the details, and of course the devil's in the details, and he just put out that one number, but the guidance is not out that includes things like square footage requirements. Mm-hmm. And we've asked the State Health Department several times that it's impossible for people to make plans without knowing that information, and that they really need to do some more messaging that this is not a done deal on the 22nd, and people have only heard March 22nd, 100 people, and they're going with it. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea when he's going to announce whether the 22nd will hold or not. And as I said, we've asked DPH multiple times for the guidance, but we've been told to hold on. Excuse me.
God bless you. Tom, did you have a comment to that?
Yeah, the answer right now is 25 people outside gathering.
Okay. Thanks, Maureen. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, team, for this incredible work. I know you have done a phenomenal job, and I only hope that the state will be able to allow you to continue to do as you were doing, because it makes a real impact on our community. This falls under COVID update, but it's not health related, but instead economic related. But I wanted to make sure that all of our business folks were aware that PPP loan forgiveness is not taxable at the federal level. But at this point, it's still an open question before Massachusetts. And so I know that as a lot of our smaller businesses are preparing their corporate tax filings and obviously their individual tax filings, it's important to be mindful of that. As I understand it, at the state level, they're still considering whether to allow that to not be taxed in the same way that it's happening at the federal government, not being taxed. But I know a lot of businesses are running into some surprises relative to that, unaware of the distinction between Massachusetts and the IRS. So I just want to encourage businesses. You can certainly reach out, at the state level and voice your support if you're concerned about that. But it does have real financial implications for any of our small businesses in town and anyone that has received PPP loans that would otherwise be forgiven. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. And at this point, last I had heard that it's still something that's being considered, but there have been no changes as of right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Ed. And Steve, if I can just share a little bit of the letter that was sent around today.
Sure, yeah.
So not we, like I had anything to do with it. The Board of Health received a letter she wrote to Governor Baker, which is awesome. This woman and her husband from Winchester received appointments at Wakefield, part of the regional, we're a regional vaccination site. So she indicated on day one, there was a long line around the building, but once inside, we were impressed with the environment of hospitality, efficiency, and skill as we made our way through the various stations. There was no wait when we returned for our final shot, but the aforementioned ease of navigation prevailed, accompanied by a sense of excitement. In the post-injection observation area, we enjoyed watching several friendly firefighters walking through the rows of people, engaging in cheerful conversation while checking for any reactions. Hope is alive, normal is within our reach, gratitude for good public servants outweigh the negativity of recent years. May I close with a resounding thank you for your diligence and your consistent concern for the well-being of the people of Massachusetts. Just such a lovely note. And as someone who brought her dad for his vaccine, it was amazing. The skill, the efficiency, but I wouldn't say party atmosphere, but the mood was so incredibly joyful and welcoming, and you could see the older people getting their vaccines. And I was standing, my dad was in line next to someone who was 90 and in their 80s and 70s. Just the look of relief. And if folks came in alone, they were immediately whisked by this group of volunteers that was just amazingly, wonderfully warm and welcoming. So it was a sight to behold. It's too bad, one of the local stations couldn't have come down and filmed it and convinced that maybe this is one way to really do vaccines. So I'm so proud of the whole team, but I thought that letter really spoke to what I had experienced when I brought my father. So thank you all and your team.
Thank you.
Steve, are we all set?
I think so. I think
Okay.
the word festive. There's a festive atmosphere.
Festive. It was a festive atmosphere. It was lovely to see. Thank you so much, Ruth and Tom.
Thank you, guys.
Moving to item 6, an approval of the minutes. May I please have a vote in a second to approve a motion and a second to approve the minutes of February 22nd, 2021.
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Julie. A roll call vote. Julie.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
And Peter.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving to item number 7, the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield. We have representatives from the Scholarship Fund who will announce the 41 annual phone-a-thon. So I'm guessing that might be Samantha Nett. Am I guessing correctly?
Yep, I'm going to
And
start.
Kathy Scanlon.
Yep, I'm going to start, and then Samantha's going to follow me.
Perfect.
I want to introduce myself. I'm Kathy Scanlon, and I'm the Vice President of the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield. And our organization was formed in 1960, and over the past 61 years, TSF has provided over 12,000 financial awards to Wakefield students, assisting them in obtaining a higher education. Last year, more than 700,000 was awarded to Wakefield full-time students of all ages, increasing the total awarded since 1960 to over $14.1 million. Some of you have probably attended our events in the past years, our golf tournament or our dinner dance, our trivia team challenge. And on Saturday, March 20th, we'll hold our 41st annual phone-a-thon. As Vice President, I'm the chairperson for that phone-a-thon. This year, because of the pandemic and to keep our adult directors and student directors safe, we're not going to be gathering in person to make the phone calls. Instead, we're going to be mailing letters to our prior phone-a-thon donors and making financial appeals to Wakefield residents via the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light mailing. And we're also trying to spread the word on social media to make it more of a virtual phone-a-thon. Last year, we raised $47,000 from the phone-a-thon, and this was instrumental in allowing us to award more than the $700,000 in scholarships to 287 Wakefield students. And our hope is to increase that number this year. So, you know, make sure to follow us on Facebook, on Instagram and Twitter. And during the day of March 20th, we're going to be posting all sorts of things to you know, make our phone-a-thon, to let people know about our phone-a-thon. And I'd like to introduce Samantha Nett. She's the president of the student directors, who's going to talk a little bit more about the phone-a-thon.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy. Samantha, if you could just identify yourself and say where you live.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scanlon. So my name's Samantha Nett. I'm a resident of 1 Nazareth Road, and I'm the current president of the student directors of the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield. So, you know, as you've heard, 1 week from this Saturday, on March 20th, we expect to have our 23 TSF student directors on social media sharing information about the 41st annual TSF phone-a-thon. We'll be letting Wakefield families know how to donate to this great cause, and we hope, you know, everyone will respond favorably to our most important fundraiser of, you know, the year. And we hope to be able to surpass the $47,000 that we raised at last year's phone-a-thon. On behalf of the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield, we would like the town council to endorse our 41st annual phone-a-thon, and we also ask that you please designate the week of March 14th through March 20th as the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield's phone-a-thon week in Wakefield. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So I'll ask if the council, before we endorse and declare the week, which I'm sure will not be an issue, does anyone have any questions? Nope. Oh, Jonathan.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think for those of us who've lived in other towns beside Wakefield, you know, it's amazing to me how much of an incredible resource and really jewel the Scholarship Foundation is to our community. I mean, this does not exist in other towns. And, you know, Kathy, to hear you talk about, you know, $700,000 last year supporting over 200 students, I mean, that's just incredible. And so I just wanted to say just a huge thank you to you and the organization, and really to everyone who donates. It does make such a difference. And again, this is not a resource that exists in every community. So appreciate all your work, and best of luck with the virtual phone-a-thon.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. It isn't something that exists in every community. We're very lucky.
That's great. And Kathy, the mailers that are going out with the gas and light bills, as well as everything online, it will be very easy for folks to just copy a web address or click and donate, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. That's perfect. Steve, do we need an official vote or?
I think an official vote would be nice.
Okay, excellent. So if I could please have a motion and a second to both endorse the 41st annual phonathon and declare March 14th through March 20th in Wakefield as the scholarship funds. Kathy, how did you put it? I'm sorry.
The Scholarship of Foundation of Wakefield's annual phonathon week.
Perfect. Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield Annual Phonathon Week, March 14th through 20th.
So moved.
Moved by Ed,
Second.
seconded by Paul. A roll call vote. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes, with much
John-
appreciation.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
and Peter.
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much for all you do, all your efforts, and hopefully we can even better that 47,000 mark from last year. Thank you both.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we're into our fourth round of fiscal year 2022 budgets. We have DPW, reserve fund budget, and retirement. So we'll take DPW first, and I'll have Kevin introduce it, and then we'll move to Joe Conway.
Madam Chair, before Kevin
Oh.
jumps in, I just want to say that this is the fourth round. There should probably be, hopefully, one more. And through these 4 rounds, including tonight's budgets, if they are all looked upon favorably, we'd be looking at an increase of 3.01% over last year. I think I was hoping for 3%, so I got to find 0.01 somewhere, maybe in Joe's budget. He's looking at me and he's laughing because he knows it's where I'm going. But I think the department heads did a really good job and willing to have very lean budgets, but effective budgets. And Kevin, of course, did a great job with it. So I want to thank them as we go forward through here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. All right, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. The DPW budget consists of 4 budgets. We have the DPW operating budget, we have the snow and ice budget, and then we have both the water and the sewer enterprise accounts. What I'll do is I'll quickly go through the DPW operating budget, give you the totals there, the totals for the snow and ice, water and sewer. Then I'll turn it over to Joe for any specific questions. On the DPW operating budget for fiscal 22, we are looking at an increase of $256,867 over the current fiscal year. This increase breaks down under personal services. The increase is $195,805, which includes contractual and negotiated increases. It also includes the restoration. Last year, we cut, I think it was $110,500 from the DPW budget. So we're restoring $52,371 to the personal services that we cut last year. That's part of the $195,805. Under the purchase of services portion of the budget, there's an increase of $61,062 over the current year. We increased various line items, several of them. The first one was stormwater management, the natural gas and electric line item, the tree removal line item, and the traffic line painting line item. The materials and supplies and other charges within this budget are all level funded. The total budget request for fiscal 22 for the DPW operating budget is $6,506,335, with $6,417,539 coming from the tax levy and $88,796 coming from available funds. Those available funds include the perpetual care income account, the park trust funds, and the sale of cemetery lot account. For budget number 30, the snow and ice budget, we are requesting level funding, $850,000. The sewer enterprise has increased $20,480 over the current year. The total budget request for fiscal 22 is $982,133. In the SOAR enterprise account has an increase for fiscal 22 of $210,165 for a total of $6,277,749. With that, I will turn it over to Joe or to the council for any specific questions, or Joe for any specific answers.
Sure. What, Joe, why don't you present first, and then I'll move to Jim if he has anything to say, and then the council can ask questions.
Sure. So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
First off? Okay. So for the record, Joe Conway, Public Works Director. Joining me tonight is our business manager, Ann Waite. So just to elaborate a little bit on what Kevin had just went through. So basically, the Public Works budget is, a four-piece budget. Tax levy funded water, sewer, and snow and ice. As Kevin had said, personal services, the net increase was 195,805. And as Kevin had mentioned, contractual service increases, along with the partial refunding of some of the cuts that we absorbed last year during the pandemic. Just quickly to talk about some of the purchase of service increases, the 61,062 on the tax side. We increased our stormwater line, $25,000. Again, this is another step in an incremental step of probably 3 phases to build that budget up to a level that's appropriate to meet our unfunded mandate with our stormwater permitting. Outside of that, in the highway division, we increased our traffic line budget $10,000. This is a line item in our budget that we have historically always underfunded. With the Envision project getting set to come online, Albion Street coming up online, line painting and some of the traffic markings that we're going to be doing is going to get a little bit more expensive. So by increasing this steadily, probably over the next 3 years, we're trying to get this line item to an appropriate level that matches what we're spending. In the building side of the tax levy budget, we have an increase in the electricity and natural gas. This portion of our budget is based off of averages for usage. And then we take those averages in consumption, we get a 5-year average on that, and then we go over and see the folks at Gas and Light to get some budgetary estimates as far as cost is concerned. One of the things I think that skewed this line item for this year is, the pandemic, was very central to HVAC. We found ourselves running units longer to cycle fresh air through buildings. We also found that the Civic Center, for example, was turned into basically the after-school program for a large majority of public schools. So we saw an increase in that, as far as cooling and heating was concerned, because the occupancy of the building was something that went from part-time as rented to basically full-time 24/7. So we're hoping that this isn't the norm, and as things, start to correct themselves and people feel safer and things start to improve, this will be a line item that hopefully in the future we'll be able to take and demonstrate that we're actually going in the right direction and moving that backwards. The last piece on the tax levy side of the budget is forestry and parks. This was a 3-year phase to get this crane rental or purchase services line item up to about $30,000. We're very fortunate that our street trees are in good condition. One of the things that we're finding though is the ones that are calling us out for service are located behind property, or they're difficult picks, and we need to rent expensive cranes or different material handlers to get to some of these things safely. This will be the last year of that increase until the industry changes, and it's something that we need to further address. We've been pretty fortunate related to snow and ice over the last few years. We have weathered the storm and been lucky enough to actually provide some turnbacks and not have to come back to the council for supplemental appropriations. So we're recommending at this time for the budget to stay level funded. I included in the memo that I sent to the council basically what an average cost would be estimated in. But if we continue to experience warmer, a little bit milder winters, this is something that we're probably going to have to reevaluate and start to think about redoing how we do some of our averages. Because clearly, at least the last 2 years, if not 3, the weather has demonstrated something a little bit out of the normal for us. I'm not saying it's a bad thing operationally or fiscally, but it's something that we should pay attention to. So with that being said, we decided to keep that right in place until things change. So on the enterprise side, I'll start with the sewer. So the MWRA assessment on the sewer actually is estimated to decrease $58,668. So the overall sewer budget increase, including the MWRA assessment, is 0.2285%. Our budget increase without the sewer assessment calculated into it is 0.8832%. The MWRA represents 75.63% of the sewer budget. Much like the tax side, the sewer budget saw some personal service adjustments related to contractual agreements, overtime adjustments related to the rate changes. The administrative expense that's shown in both the sewer side and the water side of the budget, that is an expense where the enterprises pick up a little bit of the costs for the folks in the tax collector's office. All of our bills get sent to the tax collector's office and initially processed there. That's just the enterprise paying for some of the time that goes into that. On the purchase of services side, on the sewer end of the budget, we increased the line item there $27,000 to do a Farm Street pumping station cleaning program. I've said it a few times. I'm sure Mr. Sullivan's at least heard me say it twice now. In my opinion and the opinion of the staff here at Public Works, the most important building in the town of Wakefield, sits at the corner of Water Street and Farm Street. The overwhelming majority of everything that goes down the drain goes into the wet wells of that building, passes through the pumps, and gets pushed towards the MWRA. One of the things we looked at when we were developing the budget was to put together a program where we actually go into that building and proactively clean it every quarter. We all got a good laugh about replacing the Muffin Monster last year. So think of it this time as giving the Muffin Monster his quarterly checkup to make sure that there's no problems with that building. It's proactive. It's good because it addresses the grease where it all collects, and we get it before it pushes it down into the line and causes other problems for us. Another area of increase we saw on the sewer side was a little bit of an uptick in electricity and natural gas. Again, this is based on averages of consumption and rates given to us by the light department. Our averages are up a little bit. Obviously, more people home, more people washing, more people sending more water through the drain. Our pumping stations are running 24/7, 365. And that was just to adjust to that. We brought up our emergency fund in the sewer side of the house, $3,000. Really, the reason for this was we found that what we were budgeting wouldn't actually replace some of the pumps we have in our pumping station. So we brought this up to make sure that we could be able to do that, God forbid, if we ever had to. It's an increase of $13,151 for sewer user charge. So what this is there are some homes in Wakefield that jurisdictionally fall within the boundaries of Wakefield. Based on where they are, the geographic location, Wakefield might not have the infrastructure in the roadway to service water and sewer. So this number right here is a bill that we would pay peer communities for using their sewage. What you'll see, especially on the water side, is that the MWRA assessments are up a little bit this year. So this number equates to our average flows and making sure that we can handle what we're assuming our peer communities' rates are going to be. We had a small increase in materials supplies, and we saw some of the maturing debt in sewer decrease $63,518. On the water side, our MWRA water assessment estimate actually decreased this year. It went down $35,576 preliminarily. A large part of this is because the folks at the water division took a hard look at the timing on when our peak consumption was we were drawing from the MWRA and decided to alter the operational hours of our treatment plant so that we could take out some of the curve there. So just to put perspective, the job that those folks did by realigning that and taking off some of the peak consumption. Preliminarily, the town of Reading's water assessment is going up 18.5%. The town of Stoneham is going up 24.6%. The town of Melrose, 13.6%. Wakefield reduced 1.3%. So I couldn't be more proud of the job that those folks did there, especially with everything going on this year. A budget increase on the water side with the MWRA is 3.4637. Our increase without the MWRA is 4.05%. On the water side, the MWRA makes up 45.36% of our budget. Again, much like the other two, personal services are up a little bit due to contractual agreements, overtime related to the same thing. You'll see the other side of the administrative expense. And one big thing in the water side is about 3 years ago, we did some banning to do some water work. And the first year of the payments is due this year. So we're up 120,933. The nice thing I can report here is we're at the peak of the debt in the water side. And next year, that line will fall almost exactly what it increased this year. And it will continue to fall every year subsequently, unless we were to add more borrowing into that. The purchase of services on the water side, we're up 41,752. Again, the water user charges for homes that need to be serviced by other communities' water infrastructure. Given the percentages in those other communities, we're expecting that to go up. Another area that we had to increase this year is professional services for contractors. This is something where if we have a repair or we have a piece of infrastructure that we need to fix, we need to bring in specialized equipment. We would have to hire that out. That's an industry that's very expensive. It costs between $150 and $200 a foot to replace pipe. All your valving is expensive. It takes time. So this is something that we needed to adjust to make sure we could cover it. And then lastly, professional services related to water, the inclusion of a new line, which is professional services for water production. What we had is professional services was lumped into everything we were doing related to producing water out of the Broadway treatment plant, as well as hiring contractors in to do distribution work and help us with some of the things that we need help with out in the roadway. So we thought it was appropriate to call out specifically some of the things we were doing in the treatment plant so that we could accurately budget for it. This is things like mailings for testings, different laboratory equipment inside the building that we might need and whatnot. With that said, that's basically the rundown of the budget this year. I'd say that the goal this year was to be as modest as we could be to make sure that we could maintain our core services. And we're pretty proud of the number that we came back with this year across the board. So I think at this time I'd open up to maybe Jim, if you have anything to add to that.
Thanks, Joe. And I'm representing the subcommittee, the DPW subcommittee from Finance Committee. I am the chair of the subcommittee. I would just echo what Joe said. I think it's a relatively modest budget overall. We were thrilled with the assessments from MWRA, both water and sewer. And, that was wonderful news for us to take in and absorb. On the operation side, I think that the new team is picking up and doing a great job. But the old team was, you heard about the water pumping, you hear about the cleaning of the Farm Street and Water Street pump station. The overall increase of 4.11 seems to be right in line with some of our budgetary numbers. Lastly, for the team that the subcommittee that I'm involved with, Dennis Hogan is on the subcommittee, and many probably know he's got his hands in and around DPW for many, many years. So he gives Joe a good workout line for line when we do the subcommittee discussion. And again, overall, I think we continue to have a good team in the DPW, and the numbers and the budget, looked good to us. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. And thank you, Joe. Does any member of the council have questions for Joe or Jim? Or Kevin? Jonathan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Joe. I want to really, first of all, just congratulate you on the peak water strategy that you talked about. I mean, that's such a good example of kind of smart planning on the part of the department, and something that had a real and measurable impact on the MWRA assessment. So first of all, just thank you for that, and really kudos to your team for working through that. That's extraordinary.
They deserve all the credit. I just happen to be the one that gets to present it.
Well, good. Well, please pass that along, because again, that's just an extraordinary result, and something that your team should be incredibly proud of.
Thank you.
I have a number of questions, and I think the number of questions that I have is kind of reflexive of the complexity of the budget, not to any concern whatsoever of, sort of how the spending is panning out. But, because it is a large budget and because there are a lot of moving pieces, please bear with me through a few of these. First thing I just wanted to ask, if you could remind us, with the cuts that we had made sort of last year as we were heading into the pandemic, the 100,000 or so, about half of which has been restored. Can you just remind us as to what wasn't factored into the 2020 budget that you've incorporated this year?
Sure. So one of the things that we ended up deferring because of the budget cuts was essentially a partial FTE in engineering. If you remember last year, we had asked for some administrative help in that area to keep the engineers designing and on, more high level, position appropriate work, where they were kind of doing a little bit of everything. So we lost some money in that department. We ended up deferring and kind of riding out what we could through the pandemic, just to kind of see, nobody knew at that time, right? So what is the outcome going to look like? What is the new world going to be? So one of the things we ended up doing is our stormwater manager, Claire, had left us in the summertime. So when she had left, we kind of were thrown into a little bit of a tailspin. We needed to do some alignment. So with the deferment of the admin position and her position, that's where most of the budget cut was absorbed for the time being. This year coming forward, we've asked to put that admin position back. We've had an exceptional year with being able to attain grants. Almost $500,000 in grant funding came out of that office. So we're hoping to, continue that trend. So we put that money back to help those folks stay on that, stay designing the projects ahead of the grant announcements, so that when the announcements do come up, we have the designs in the queue, we can match them to the grant funding and hopefully bring back some more projects to put, some work down on the street. The other end of the cut actually came from the highway division. We ended up losing approximately $58,000 there. Some of it was with the loss of the supervisor. Don Schneider had retired last year, and we consciously deferred until late in the summertime, just before winter, to fill that position. The other line that we had deferred was some related to police details. We carry some in our budget for some of the festivities that happened through town that were obviously canceled. The good news is that this year we were able to hire the successful candidate for the highway supervisor, came from in-house, so he is homegrown, and he was coming from the laborers group into the supervisory group. So naturally, he ended up at the lower end of the salary spectrum. So we didn't need to fund that, all the way up to what the difference was last year. Same thing with basically the summer, losing, the 4th of July this year and some of the other things that we would normally be doing. We didn't feel that we needed the money there to be able to be successful in this budgetary season. So that hopefully explained, shed a little bit more light onto what you're wondering.
That does. Thank you very much. Couple of other sort of specific questions. On the stormwater program spending, in terms of the increase for 25,000, one thing I did note is that sort of the year-to-date spending's been very low. Should I assume that that's sort of a timing issue in terms of when those costs get incurred, or is there another reason why we would have expected that to be kind of underspent for the current fiscal year?
Sure. So some of the testing is related to, you have to do a round of dry weather testing. You also have to do some wet weather testing. One of the things that we also found, which is could be said for at least 3 or 4 line items in the total budget, as far as last year's expenditures or even early expenditures this year, is that with the construction season in the spring, basically more or less shutting down unless you were the state. We found that when it was safe to return to work, everybody was cramming much more work into a more condensed schedule to make up for all the time lost. So it put us a little bit behind and probably where we would like to have been. We've made up for most of that throughout the fall, and then we're going to be on track to have a very, very, very busy spring. That, contributed to a little bit of that. It skewed a little bit of the numbers and made it look like a couple of the lines we weren't spending where we normally would be.
Okay, great. Another area of underspending that I just wanted to kind of highlight was the sidewalk repair piece. Again, I'm assuming and actually hoping that that's timing, but this is one area where to the extent that there's sort of a budget line item that I really would love you to see you guys maximize. This would be one of them. I think we all hear sort of comments and concerns about the state of the sidewalks, and so definitely want to make sure that that's something that we are maximizing the resources we've allocated to that every year. And certainly if you ever feel like you've kind of run out of spots to investigate, let us know, because I'm sure we can drum up, based on some constituent complaints, other areas that we'd want to look at. So just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
Finally, on the underspending side, before just a couple of other observations for the future. You did mention sort of the energy costs around the electricity and natural gas lines, and I just wanted to push on that a little bit, because again, it looks like at least based on the 6-month data that's in the budget for the current fiscal year, that we're trending sort of at or below the prior years in terms of spend. And so I just wanted to understand, are we seeing that increase in the 2 months since the mid-year assessments were done in terms of spending, or where do we project that to end up? Because it does look like, based on our historic run rates and even based on sort of where we are year to date, that we've certainly got room in the budget there that would maybe suggest that an increase for fiscal 22 isn't perhaps needed. So could you talk a little bit more about that, and just how sort of the mechanics of that analysis have played out?
Sure. I would say at this point in time, we're probably projecting to be right where we would be normally during any other year. One of the other things that skewed a little bit what's going on is there was a slowdown basically in the mail. We had replaced our office admin. We had to hire a new one in the middle of the pandemic. So some of the bill processing was a little bit slower than we would have liked it to been. So you're seeing what is warrant 26, which is essentially halfway through the season. If you were to look at some of the subsequent warrants after that, you'd start to see an uptick into that as more things started rolling in. I do know, like the November gas and electric bills were paid late, probably right after this was printed for the budget. So hopefully we're behind all that, and all the kinks between the mail and operating and what the new normal turned out to be are behind us, and that can even out. I would say I sure hope it does, because operationally it makes it a heck of a lot easier.
Yep. Okay, no, great, thank you. That's helpful to know, and that definitely sort of explains what, I think when you look at the numbers without context, can be a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to have to use that as a redundancy, but it's one of the things that that we face with everything. We're optimistic in that regard, though. The town's doing a lot of things to combat that and take our energy consumption in our buildings and actually turn that and start driving it in the other direction. So hopefully over the next few years, our baseline will be our baseline, but then we'll be showing consistency of reducing that as time continues on.
Great. Well, just two observations, and then again, just appreciate you bearing with me for a lot of questions on a complex budget.
That's okay.
The first observation is just specific to the water and sewer enterprise. Again, some of this may be timing, but when you look at sort of the last couple of years on trends for some of those line items, it does seem that we're consistently over budgeting. And certainly if you've listened to any of the other council meetings, I've brought this up with Mr. Mayo really for years, but I mention it specific to the enterprise accounts because I think it's something that's particularly concerning there, we do hear a lot from residents about water and sewer rates. And, while I certainly don't want to be over aggressive in budgeting or kind of, be overly sort of permissive on where we think we might not spend so that we find ourselves, at a place where we've got to make up for it at the end of the fiscal year. I also am kind of mindful of, putting dollars in the enterprise budgets that then translate directly into rate issues for the folks that are paying their water and sewer bills. And so I would just ask for the future that that's something we'd be really mindful of. I don't want to be excessively conservative in padding those budgets. And I use that phrase not to suggest that that's what's happened in the past, but I would just ask that we be really cautious in terms of how we budget there, so that we're not asking ratepayers to pay potentially a little bit more than they might need to. The second observation or question is, and again, this is more of sort of a future state, but this came up when we went through the IT budget and talked about the C-Click Fix app. And one of the questions that I asked them that I want to put out there as well, or observations, that I do want to make sure that we've got a mechanism within the DPW for both sort of tracking and measuring kind of the performance and resident complaints that we see. And so, I put this out there not as a question to necessarily answer today, because I think it's probably something that warrants some more discussion than we may want to take tonight. But I would ask that be something that you consider and maybe take some opportunity in the future to come back to the town council and just share with us what your strategy and vision is in terms of using data to improve performance of the department. I think what you described in terms of the peak flow strategy for water is a good example of where you have used data really successfully for a good outcome, but would love to just understand more about a broader strategy in that area.
Absolutely. I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all.
Great. Well, thank you again, and appreciate you and my colleagues bearing with me. Great work, and appreciate your time answering the questions tonight.
Anytime, you're welcome.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Julie.
I just wanted to circle back to something Jonathan, I think, made more of a statement, and maybe didn't let you answer, Joe, is the sidewalk budget. Do you expect that to be funded to the full amount? Okay.
I expect us to have that. Any remaining balance that's in that is going to be put into the ground as projects.
Okay.
So one of the interesting things is our highway division kind of became a logistics and traffic control department for a little while as guidance was coming out and barriers were coming out and setting up different things, around town for outdoor dining and whatnot. So some of that, was deferred naturally because our attention was somewhere else, but we plan on, putting every dollar into the ground to improve that infrastructure. We've clearly defined over the past few years that that's a need that we want to see, addressed.
Great. That's consistent with, I think, what we're all hearing in the community as well. So thank you. Two other quick questions. I know the Clean Lake Committee hasn't met in a while, but are there any budget items related to Lake? I mean, I know we do things around stormwater and whatnot, but how do you see that moving forward?
So the stormwater part of the stormwater budget is to start planning for and constructing some of the green infrastructure, to improve runoff into our water bodies. As you know, our engineering group or our whole group as a whole was very successful with grants this year. The one that did leave, a little bit of a bad taste, I would say definitely in my mouth, if not the group's, is the grant that we put in for the drainage infrastructure around the lake. I could tell you that it seems like there's a good amount of funding in that area. Having the staff running at a high speed right now is something that we are designing into every project that we do. It's a consideration for every paving project, every infrastructure project across the board. So it's a lot of the framework and the checklist for every single decision we make on what work we do anywhere. We'd certainly like to be doing more green infrastructure, and using, some input from the community to address some other areas. I do know that Wakefield is going to be on our radar very shortly to address them down there. And hopefully we'll be able to continue working our way right around at least Lake Quannapowitt to get some more improvement projects along the way there.
Great. Thank you. I know you're working on that, and I know you're working on a lot of other things you haven't even brought up here, you and Ann. And one question I have, and what made me think of it is I was at the Light Department Commissioners meeting last week, and I wouldn't say they're having a problem with arrears, but there are certainly people who can't pay their bills given the environment and the economic environment that we're in. And I'm wondering whether you're seeing anything similar and kind of how it might impact the budget and how we're dealing with it on kind of a personal level with these people.
If you had asked me that question in October, I might have given you a different answer just based on what we were seeing from a collection standpoint. I could say Ann had just run a recent collections report, and believe it or not, we stand very well. If we were to, close the year now, the unpaid number would be less than the lien that went out last year. So in regard to that, I feel like we're in excellent shape. We have one more quarter to go, and we don't see any reason why we wouldn't meet our expenditures or anything like that. I would say if there's anybody out there that has reached out to us that is going through a hard time or finds himself in a little bit of a financial hole, we are more than willing and have been working with anybody who will come to us to make sure that nobody is burdened to the point where it is completely life altering. We want to make sure that we're a partner, not someone that is in the way of being able to function in their daily life. So it's definitely a two-way conversation where we bend a little, the person on the other side might bend a little, or we come to some sort of agreement and work our way into making things as feasible as possible in that regard.
Great. And I know the Light Department is similarly taking the same approach. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for your entire team's work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Conway, I just want to thank your entire team for what you've been able to do, especially with regards to grants. I know you touched upon it, but when we're talking about sidewalks and things, DPW and the town as a whole has done a really good job of securing some really impactful funding that will lead to those sidewalks being improved and expanded without, directly impacting our taxpayer dollars, our tax base. So thank you for that. And along with that, the same lines, the number of trees that I've seen planted has been really impressive. And I know that Dennis Fazio and his team are really committed to that. And it makes a difference around our community. So thank you. And just finally, I think it comes down to two words, the pit. People love the pit. I think I hear about the pit more than probably any other piece of town. That's one of my passions, but I can say that people just love the pit. And so the more that you can do to provide access to our residents, I know that people are just so grateful for it. So thank you for that. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Ed the Pit Dombrowski. I think that's going to live with you.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'm cool with it.
Any other questions? I also want to thank Joe and Ann too. I hear nothing but good things about the leadership that you're both affording your team, and thank you so much. And I would just echo what everyone else said. So seeing no further questions, if I could have a motion in a second, I'm going to list the 4 budgets and then we can vote on them. We can have one vote. So the DPW budget is $6,506,335. And Kevin, tell me if I'm off. The snow and ice budget 30 is $850,000. DPW sewer budget number 31 is $8,982,133. And the final budget, water budget number 32 is $6,277,749.
That's correct.
Excellent. Okay, if I could please have a motion in a second.
Madam Chair, move to approve the 4 budgets as presented.
Moved by Jonathan.
Second.
Seconded by Ed. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe and Ann and Jim, for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Kevin, moving to budget 42, the reserve fund budget.
Steve, did you want to handle that?
Yep, I'll handle this one. I don't think in 12 years I've ever brought a budget back to ask it to be increased. I brought them back to be decreased. But, you know, in meeting with the finance committee and talking about the reserve fund, and I've shared this with the council, it seems to me that where we are with our total overall budget and our total overall financial position of the town, that we should increase the reserve fund from 300,000, I think, to 400,000. Reason being is that it would be in it would be in comportment with our financial policy, which the regulators really like, and also helps us with our bond rating. And our actual budgets are getting a little bit larger, so it kind of makes perfect fiscal sense. So after discussing it with the Finance Committee, I would request that the town council reconsider their vote of on March, reconsider their previous vote of 300,000, and then increase this budget to 400,000. The vote for reconsideration would have to be by a 2/3 margin and made by someone on the positive side. It was a unanimous vote, so anybody can make that motion. I just think it makes some sense. And at the end of the day, if we don't use it, and you could look back at our history, we've budgeted very, very well, and we haven't used a lot of reserve funds over the years. But there have been years where we've been close, and this certainly does make a little bit more sense. And it was discussed at length at the Finance Committee meeting. I don't know if we still have the chairman of the Finance Committee on. Maybe he wants to add a few words on that article.
No, really just, as you said, Steve, you know, policy and discussion, as the budgets, you know, over a 5-year period have crept up, or, you know, it just seems prudent, especially, you know, we say on the bond ratings and you're trying to, you know, get loans and so forth. It just seemed prudent from the discussion the group had. So that was it. Thanks.
You're muted, Ann.
I do it once every meeting at least. Thank you. Any questions with regard to the vote for reconsideration? No. All right, excellent. And I appreciate that if the folks who are doing the bond ratings like it, then that's a good thing. That can only help us. So I need a motion and a second to increase a vote for reconsideration to increase the reserve fund budget from 300,000 to $400,000.
So Madam Chair, is it 2 votes?
2 votes. You need 2 votes.
2 votes. Okay, sorry. The first is just the
just to reconsider.
To reconsider. Get it. So I need a vote and a second to reconsider our vote. Moved by Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
Paul.
Yes.
And Peter.
Yes.
Excellent. So we have unanimously voted to reconsider. And now the second is to move that number from 300,000 to 400,000
yes,
for the reserve fund budget. Could I please have a motion and a second for that?
So moved.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Julie. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Julie.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the council.
Thank you, Steve. The final budget for tonight's consideration is the retirement budget.
Yes, the retirement budget for fiscal 22, the retirement board budget, we're looking for an increase of $298,907. This increase breaks down under the contributory tax levy portion. There was an increase of $207,202. Under the non-contrib tax levy portion, there's a decrease of $4,182. The water, sewer, and light department enterprise transfers increased a total of $95,887. This budget is based on an updated funding schedule that was voted by the Wakefield Retirement Board. It runs through 2036 and is based on a January 2020 valuation. The current funding ratio for the retirement board's funds are 64.7%. We use a rate of return assumption of 7.4%. The total budget request for fiscal 22 is $6,977,405, with $5,599,427 coming from the tax levy, and $1,377,978 coming from the enterprise transfers.
Thank you, Kevin. Steve, is anyone else talking on this budget?
No, I do not believe so.
Excellent. Any questions from the council to Kevin on the retirement budget? All right. Seeing none, if I could please have a motion and a second to confirm the retirement budget at $6,977,405.
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan.
Second.
Seconded by Paul. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Julie.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Ed.
Aye.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Paul. Paul?
Yes.
Okay, and Peter?
Yes.
Great, unanimously voted. Thank you so much, Kevin. I think you're
Thank
cut
you.
loose right now.
All right, thank you.
Moving to item number 9, annual town meeting articles. The first is a proposal of DPW warrant article for the May 8th, 2021 annual town meeting. We'll kick that over to Joe Conway, I assume.
Yes. So Madam Chair, I have well, I shouldn't say that. I have 2 warrant articles. The first being our annual eminent domain article. This is our $1 article to allow us to take easements in eminent domain proceedings as functions for some of the construction that we try to do. This is our annual yearly article that we put in. It's essentially an insurance article for us. That's something that is important that we get into the warrant every year. There's not a whole heck of a lot to talk about related to it. I think we've all probably heard it multiple times. I can assure you that absolutely zero has changed in regard to it, but it is included to be included on the warrant. I would pose a question to Mr. Mayo. Steve, do you want to talk about refuse and recycling next, or should we talk about the budget appropriation?
I think refuse and recycling.
Okay. So as the members of the council know, this fall, Public Works had to go out to RFP for a new recycling contract. I apologize wholeheartedly for the wordiness of the 6-page memo that I sent you related to all things that contract, but I could guarantee you I could have probably turned it into a 12-page memo, but didn't want to bore you all to death. So related to recycling. So our recycling contract was set to expire 10/20/2021. So last fall, the Department of Public Works went out to RFP to procure a new contract. So with help from the Advisory Board of Public Works, some inquiries into the DEP, and reaching out to the Environmental Sustainability Committee, included in our requests for proposals, we included a baseline weekly collection, bi-weekly collection. We've also included over 15 criteria where we asked the vendors for different things that people in the community would have wanted to see as a part of that proposal. We had 3 vendors submit proposals to us. Each vendor had been interviewed at least 2 times in person We tried to negotiate different things for the town and the residents of town, and also get them to sharpen their pencils and give us better pricing. All of the proposals were timed to line up with the fiscal year. Due to a couple of things, our refuse and recycling contracts were actually expiring in September and October. So what we wanted to do for a matter of good housekeeping was get them to align with the budget to go fiscal year to fiscal year. Right now, the way that it's presently constituted is you would take a monthly cost from one year and a monthly cost from the second year and have to combine that to get your annual fiscal cost. One of the things that we did in this recycling RFP, I don't think it is any secret that last year when we went out for a refuse disposal contract, we were a little disappointed in the outcome and some of the costs that came with that. So not knowing how the COVID-19 pandemic affected, the folks in the waste world, we had asked every vendor, if there was a waste collection and or disposal pricing that they wanted to also entertain with this. With changes in some of the markets, potentially, we wanted to make sure that if there was an adjustment for us to get some more advantageous pricing, we were able to do that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So the recycling contract. So the most advantageous proposal was from JRM. It was for single stream, manual, bi-weekly collection, and it was for a proposed term of 5 years and 9 months. The highlight of this proposal from JRM is that there's a zero increase in cost for the first 9 months of the new extended contract. So essentially our contract was to expire this fall. We would take the same monthly price and they're going to bring that to the end of the fiscal year for us. Another highlight in JRM's proposal is that there was no penalty for contamination. There was no processing fee per ton, and there was no participation limitation. We noted that some of the automatic or the automated proposals had shown some limitations, and actually it was a little counterintuitive because we were paying a per ton processing fee and only allowing 1 barrel at the curb. Another highlight of the contract would be the JRM is to attend a minimum of 2 events, likely the Festival by the Lake or Wakefield 101, or otherwise dictated by Public Works or even the council. And JRM will be working with the town to promote and procure competitive pricing for dwellings in town over 4 units that aren't currently served by Public Works. So one of the big questions that we get every time we go through this is their ability to put in place a weekly contract. We made it a mandatory field for every contractor to answer, to propose to us weekly pricing, but then also answer to their best estimate what they would experience as far as a participation increase. Almost all of them, it was very, very consistent, reported between 3 and 11% of a curbside increase by moving to weekly recycling collection. If you were to look at that comparatively to what the pricing came in, you would see that the contract pricing was increasing between 40 and 60%. So evaluating that and thinking about it, for an 11% increase at the curbside, for 40 to 60% of an overall contract cost increase, it didn't really make a whole lot of financial sense at the time. So we went back to them and asked, is there any way that we can offer some conveniences to this, to try to use bi-weekly collection that was the most financially sound, but also offer some conveniences. One of the things that we found was that more often than not, we're constantly told that someone comes in and orders a brand new cell phone and it ships in a box that you could put an ironing board in, and the cardboard is cumbersome and it collects and it takes up a lot of space. So Public Works was successful in negotiating a cardboard drop-off with JRM. So what that means is DPW will procure a dumpster that will likely be stationed at the Nahaj Street Yard Waste site, and we will provide drop-off for residents for clean cardboard. When that is full, JRM is permitting the town to take it to their Greenworks facility. JRM will also be giving the town potential revenue for this. So what they're going to do is propose to pay a dividend to the town, which is the market rate. They subtract a $45 bailing fee, and the difference is in net revenue to the town. So at the time of the memo that I had sent the council, Yellow cardboard was running about $65 or $60 a ton, excuse me. If you subtract the $45 baling fee per ton, the town would see a $15 net revenue. This is something that, you know, for us to be able to perform this service isn't a very heavy lift. It is the first time since Hilt's Disposal went bankrupt where we've seen anybody entertain the possibility of potentially sharing a dividend with the town. In no means do I think that the town will get in the cardboard, you know, recycling business, but, you know, as a work-in to take off some of the burden, you know, from some of the bulky, cumbersome cardboard, this seemed like a no-brainer, especially when we're seeing a little bit of return. So JRM also included a refuse component to their proposal. As stated, the new pricing for refuse disposal made us ask just to see if anything changed in the market that we may or may not be able to take advantage of. JRM was the only proposer for the refuse. We did not have any vendor bid on the actual incineration portion of it. This proposal by JRM actually offered a unique chance for some housekeeping. We were actually able to realign the contract here with the fiscal years and recognize some savings through reorganizing. So some highlights of JRM's proposal was that the contract in place for refuse collection would extend 2 years and 9 months. That will run completely in parallel with the recycling option. Much like recycling, there's no increase in costs for the first 9 months. They're going to hold the final month price of what the refuse collection is now and carry that forward to fiscal 23. In the refuse side, they've also offered 2 shredding days to the town, one for town buildings such as town hall and public safety, and then another for a public event. Think of the big purge event that was supposed to happen around Earth Day last year that ultimately got canceled. This is something that JRM would go to and would be part of their contract. Realignment of this contract saves the town an estimated $91,223 over the extension. Refuse and recycling are the two, you know, the bread and butter of this. One of the other questions that we got time and time again related to this world is there any way that we could institute some sort of composting? We had asked all of the vendors who had, you know, supplied RFP to us if that's something that they could handle. Unfortunately, in some of the bigger companies, it's not in their business model quite yet, or for that to be, you know, financially feasible for them, they would need town-wide implementation. The unknown of the next year and where we stood financially, it didn't make sense to invest in a curbside program, committing a lot of, you know, public funds to it. So what could we do? A tip to me from a member of the Environmental Sustainability Committee had said that communities were going out to RFP for preferred vendor pricing. So I was provided a contract to take a look at and see what some other communities have done. We said this is a great idea for us to get ahead of a trend that's coming, and certainly something that the DEP is encouraging as far as waste diversion efforts are concerned with municipalities. Knowing that the 3 proposals for the recycling and ultimately refuse contract did not entertain serious consideration for this, Ann and myself put out a simultaneous RFP. We wanted to get a more focused response on composting to see if we could indeed, like our peers, get preferred vendor pricing for composting services at the curb. We got one response from a company I think that everybody is familiar with, Black Earth Composting. Some of the highlights of this RFP that came into us were that Wakefield residents would get pricing discounts based on the volume of subscribers. The more subscribers that were signed up in town, the less cost across the board for residents. This is a situation where if we were to execute a contract, no town dollars would be committed. We would commit a little bit of time and a little bit of effort as far as advertising is concerned with our partnership. In the Black Earth RFP, the following was asked of the town. So as I mentioned, they laid out subscriber tiers. So after certain thresholds, the pricing would start to drop. You know, the more people that signed up, it would drop continually and continually. There's a social media component. where if the town would commit to a quarterly advertisement, just that this partnership existed and that they were the preferred vendor of the town for this service, they would take one of the thresholds in their RFP and lower it. Another thing that they had mentioned in their RFP is if the town would incentivize homeowners by offering to fund their starter kits and bins, that would also trigger a threshold reduction for pricing. And then finally, Black Earth had asked if they could park up to 4 empty vehicles at the Nahaj Street Yard Waste site. And if you remember in my memo, this is something that we used to do with Hiltz Disposal, where we would let Hiltz park an empty vehicle there so that they were driving, a 4-door sedan back and forth from work instead of having to drive that truck to Rockport. So with the Black Earth proposal, Ann and myself sat down with them and talked about some other things that we can improve. We were trying to leverage further threshold reductions for the pricing. So one of the things is the use of an RDP grant. So it wasn't just engineering this year that got the grant fever. Ann was able to successfully get a grant from the recycling dividends points and made it possible to use some funding to fund up to 200 starter kits for this purpose for free. And what this would do is the town would purchase them with the grant, again, no cost to the tax levy. And as we are notified, we would simply deliver them and start people to incentivize them to, divert some of their waste from the incinerator. Another thing that was mentioned that we want to talk about is the potential of offering a complimentary pass to residents who can show proof of a six-month subscription. So one of the things that we had talked about in our meeting with Black Earth is that, we do some of our own composting on our own. And if someone was down there doing that, should we incentivize them for taking part in the curbside too, where they're reducing some of the waste that goes out on the curb? We thought that it was a good idea. We don't know completely how many people might take advantage of this, but for someone that is willing to invest some of their own money to divert waste at the curb, we thought this was an easy way to incentivize them and to continue that. So we feel that by exercising a partnership like this, we're going to benefit twofold. The goal would be to divert as much waste as we can at the curbside from heading to the incinerator. And one of the other benefits of this too is that hopefully we're also diverting solids and things that could be composted from going down the drain, which will help the sewer division operationally. So this is a summary really quickly. I would just like to really quickly acknowledge the ESC and the advisory board. We threw literally everything but the kitchen sink at this one, and took the initial proposals and sent them back for more. And it was something that I think we got a pretty good, robust response. We got some good pricing for the town and offered some creative alternatives to hopefully drive those prices down even further. So I don't know if we want to open this up to questions at this point, or I can go into the warrant article related to it.
You want to talk about the warrant article and then we can take questions, Joe?
Sure.
That sounds
Okay.
great.
So the warrant article here is our annual refuse recycling and yard waste budget. It's broken out in direct comparison to last year versus this year and some of the percentage changes. What you'll notice is one of the other cuts that we sustained last year is we basically removed any gravel processing or leaf removal from the Nahaj Street Yard Waste site. So you see that has returned this year. There's some other areas that increased because of contractual arrangements with the labor union, some other things that we deferred. The sad one that we deferred was the 3rd grade program that we had been putting on for years. The methodology behind that is we actually go into all the schools, get all the 3rd grade classrooms in elementary school, and basically have a folk singer come in and do a whole enrichment program on recycling, yard waste, and all things sustainability. Not knowing the complete picture of what the year is going to look like, and the fact that we do it in such large groups of 70, 80 students at a time, we felt at this time we should probably remove that from the budget until we know that it's safe to continue that. So for this point in time, it's out, but it would be something that we'd like to see come through. The other thing you'll notice is in the worksheet that I sent related to refuse, some of the things that we're starting to see come out of the DEP is that as a best management practice, they are actually recommending and trying to put the pressure on towns to implement fees for bulk collection. It's something that you're going to see probably start popping up more and more and more. It's no secret that refuse disposal is expensive, and that it is something that if we don't try to manage it carefully, it could, become something that costs us more than we'd like. So for a complete picture of, exactly what this would look like, we showed an option A and an option B. Option A would be full appropriation of the budget as requested for $2,284,011. Option B is something that shows what an in-kind bulk fee for pickup on the curb would look like. That's based off of the $20 bulk item fee, which is the same price as CRT, TVs, and white goods. And part of the reason why we wanted to show this is because this is something that we're going to be hearing more and more and more, and we wanted to make sure that we presented it to the council so that we could make the best informed financial decision that we can related to this warrant article. I don't think I have anything more to add at this point, so we could probably open it back up, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you, Joe.
Can I jump in quickly in?
Oh, sure, of course.
I just want to say that I think that Joe and Ann did a great job with this, and thanks to the Environmental Sustainability Committee that they met with in the advisory board. This is the wave of the future, and I think they're getting us ahead of the curve. So kudos to them for really thinking outside of the box and checking off a lot of boxes in the interim. One concern I get from a lot of people, and Joe mentioned it about the cardboard, is that, let's face it, everybody's getting everything from Amazon today, and it's cardboard city, and they're sick of hanging it around at their house. This gives them a way to get rid of it, and maybe we can make a few bucks instead of throwing in the trash that we know that people do. We know that happens. So we save it on that end too. So I think kudos to Joe and Ann for a great job with this.
Yeah, I would just echo what Steve said. Going on to almost my 9th budget. Joe, the effort you put into really reaching out to vendors and thinking outside the box is something that's, I don't think we always see. So I appreciate that so much. The budget was very easy to follow, a very complicated budget. And the fact that you really worked to get the best deals for the town, I think is something to be very proud of. It's funny, on the $20 bulk item fee, I assumed we had one. And I remember going to the window and asking how much it costs. And they're like, no, it's free. It makes sense to me, maybe to have the fee doesn't offend me so much, because if I'm putting a huge item out there, I appreciate that that's something extra that I'm doing. So I was under, I just always thought it was similar to the white good and the CRT pickup. So going for questions now, Julie and then Jonathan.
I echo everything that's been said. I, as part of the Environmental Sustainability Committee, Joe and Ann worked tremendously hard with us and took all of our sometimes, crazy ideas and wish list and really came through. I'm super excited about this composting program. I feel like it's a kind of a private public partnership that is going to be a pilot that will demonstrate to people the value of it. I think it's going to take a lot of weight out of our municipal waste stream. It's going to have tremendous climate benefits, and I really hope it helps our sewer as well. I'm also excited about it, as well as the cardboard recycling, because if I'm not mistaken, Joe, our municipal neighbors who may not have roadside, curbside pickup can utilize the drop off for the cardboard and enter into their own arrangement with Black Earth on composting. So I feel like it's bringing some different populations into the fold. Am I correct on that, Joe?
Yes, I would say as far as the cardboard is concerned, right now, as far as the commodities, that is probably the most valuable that we collect at the curb. So that's something that, once we get the infrastructure in place to do that, as long as the dividends are coming in, the more the merrier. For us to take it to Peabody is a quick 30-minute round trip ride. So doesn't bother me if we're there every day. We're seeing that, the return on that. And if for some reason, the commodities change and it ends up being a cost, we'd simply just stop until it corrects. So.
Okay. So that's good. I think that's great. I know that I've asked for other things that probably doesn't have such a great return, like a styrofoam drop off at the pit as well. But we can continue to look into those. There's lots of things that we can continue to do. You didn't mention the textile recycling that you put into place this year, but I think that's probably also that's been a tremendous success as well. So thank you for that. And I'll just end. Clearly, I'm very excited by all this. But I will end by saying I also support the $20 bulk fee charge. It is very much becoming standard in Massachusetts. And if I'm not mistaken, it also gives us another point or couple of points on what they call this dividend list, which eventually when you save up all these dividends, it results in grants like the one we just heard about to purchase the compost. The other thing that's given us points is something the library did this year, which is the Library of Things, where they loan out not just books, but equipment or ukuleles or other things. And so it's just this shared, this shared culture that helps reduce consumption. So I'm really happy to see people across the board kind of getting excited about this. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Julie. Jonathan, then Ed.
Sure. Just two comments. First of all, great job on this proposal, and I echo Councillor Santos and Councillor Smith Galvin on just the congratulations for the work well done. One comment on composting. I'm thrilled that we have sort of a preferred arrangement there. I will tell you, we've our family has worked with Black Earth for probably about 1.5 years now. And, for a family of 6, we very rarely fill, our trash barrel now more than 1/3 full. And so I think it actually will have a big impact. And, having the grants for the starter kits, as well as sort of the declining pricing as more families sign up is really critical. So great work on that. I too am also supportive of the bulk collection fee. Similar to Councillor Santos, every time that I have a bulk collection item to pick up, I find myself surprised that I don't have to pay anything. I'll also tell you that I've heard anecdotes of folks from out of town dropping bulk items off at their friends' houses in town because Wakefield picks those up for free. And so I do have a concern that, as other towns are implementing bulk item fees, if they haven't already, that I don't want us to become, kind of a dumping ground for other people's trash. And so I'm all in favor of implementing it. I think it makes good sense, and I don't think it's unduly burdensome on residents. So thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think, Jonathan, in our neighborhood, that happens. The top of my street is a different town, and I just have heard conversations from neighbors that certainly does happen. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The issue of this not costing money, as I understand it, and I support the cardboard drop off at the pit. I think that makes a lot of sense. But are you saying then, Director Conway, that we're going to end up recovering the total personnel cost that it would take to bring this cardboard to Peabody for the $15 per whatever the measure was?
No, you probably won't cover the personnel costs. You certainly cover the minuscule amount of fuel that we would spend driving it up there. But, I brought this to our staff. We talked about it at length to make sure that this wasn't something that would take us away from our day-to-day. And this is a good activity, for us at the end of the day to make a short run up to Peabody, deposit that, drop the cardboard off and make a return back. It wouldn't be something, even if it was every day, you're talking about a half an hour's worth of time. But really the whole reason for it is to try to offer some more convenience really to the whole process. In a perfect world, if we were to see recycling at the curb increase to a point where it was advantageous to bring in weekly recycling, of course, that's the option that we want to go. Unfortunately, the data that we're getting back from the people that do this every day doesn't necessarily support that at this time. And this is just another way we could try to take some of the burden away from having to hold on to those Amazon boxes and those bigger items, for that extra week.
Yeah. I just think we need, like, as part of the analysis, we need to be mindful of that when we're looking at, recycling every 2 weeks versus weekly, there are these other costs that are kind of built in when we do have every other week versus every week. And so this is just, and I'm not suggesting it's a major cost, but it'll continue to, these will continue to grow over time, and the most expensive, cost we ever have is personnel for anything that we're doing. So I have a little bit of hesitation only because of that. I think it's a great idea, and I think that it will be a convenience that people will enjoy. So I'm not opposed to it in that regard. The other piece is I think it's great. I think it's really creative that you were able to find this grant opportunity to get 200 new families or households set up with the composting, and I think it's a great way of not tapping into the tax levy in any way. The thing that I do that does give me a pause is giving complimentary pit passes to those people that are subscribed, and I don't see really a direct connect or reason why. I think that 200 households being able to get their starter kits and whatever tiered pricing is great. But I think that in and of itself is a benefit. But once we start offering pit passes out to folks, then I think we really get into a situation where it does become those not participating that are subsidizing for those that are. And I'm not really sure that we need that incentive in order for folks to compost. I think if you want to compost, you're going to compost. I don't think you're going to compost your food because you're getting a free pit pass, as a result. I don't know that incentive really matches up. And I think it's a great program. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad that 200 more families might be able to do it, but I don't see the nexus there. And then on the bulk fees, I don't agree with going from $0 to $20. And we can't be selective in comparing ourselves to communities when it benefits us. But earlier we were talking about how much better we're doing than other communities, when we're talking about, water, sewer. So I think that's a step too far, especially when we have a long history of having not done that. We don't have, like a lot of other communities have, a facility where you can go and bring items, like they're called any number of things depending on what town you're in, but basically like a swap shop where you can leave off an item and someone else can pick it up, and a good way of recycling. We don't have something like that in town. So for a lot of folks, if you have, say, like a headboard or something, you don't have a lot of options. You don't have somewhere to bring it within town. We don't have that kind of facility. And so I think it becomes awfully onerous on us to be putting that onerous on our taxpayers to be putting a $20 fee every time that they need to dispose of something. I think that's especially in COVID times where we're talking about fundraising to support the food pantry and all the other impacts that COVID has had financially to our community. I just don't think it's the time, nor do I think it's appropriate to go from $0 to $20. So I don't support that kind of an increase. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Ed. Joe, just to clarify, for the cardboard drive,
Yep.
We're not hiring a cardboard person. So there's not extra personnel cost. The cost is that for that half hour they drive to Peabody, they're not doing something else in town, but there's not an extra cost.
Correct. No.
Money cost.
Nope. If there was, I can tell you the other two vendors that proposed offered that type of service, but it was with a cost, and we politely essentially declined that. So you're correct in your assumption that you would basically be financing the half-hour time to dump a load and come back.
And Joe, just to clarify too, Ed's comments made me want clarification on the $20 fee. My memory now is you can have up to 2 items on it?
Yes, or
Okay.
110 annually is what we certified at the DEP.
Okay, so would the $20 be per fee or per pickup? I mean, per item or per pickup?
So the way that we estimated it, again, just to kind of,
Sure.
just to show what an alternative might look like, we averaged it per item.
Okay.
And we used stops. So our 5-year average for bulk collection stops is 8,457. Now, out of that 8,457, those all could be 2 items each.
Mhm.
We were just looking at how many times we are requested to stop at an address to pick up something that doesn't fit in the total.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Maureen.
Thanks, Chair. Joe, I just want to echo what some people said is I love you and Anne and your team just being so creative and thinking about some of this stuff. I know working with the environmental sustainability group and the plastic bag recycling, every time I went there, it was overflowing. And I don't know if we got 2 benches or 3 benches out of it. And I have 5 benches. I see Councillor Smith Galvin putting up 5, and she can attest to when it was taken away. I said, should I keep my plastic bags? Like, is it coming back? And she told me to keep them, and they're sitting in my garage because I didn't want to throw them out. And so I really like, I think it's such a cool partnership, and the rain barrels and now this composting. You know, I really like us being forward thinking about some of these things. And I do think it gets people exciting in our town. I talked to Steve through email a little bit. I went to DC, oh my God, a year ago, right before pandemic struck, and they have a annual farmers market outside, and people brought their composting to the farmers market. They brought, you know, DC, a lot of people live in apartments, smaller spaces. They brought Tupperware filled of compost, and they put it in the truck, these big bins. And I, you know, as we think about that, we have so many people that live in condos or apartments and might not have the ability to kind of do curbside composting. So just kind of think about creatively, you know, I'd be one of those people that would go to the farmer's market if there was a big truck there, a big bin, and put in my composting when I don't take things like my pumpkin over to Julie's house. So I just wanted to say that. And then the other thing, as we talk, again, being creative, and once we get through this pandemic, something to think about as we're talking about disposals, about big items, you know, the recycle Wakefield group and the free exchange Wakefield group, like, people do not want to throw things out, and people are, you know, there are people who are just giving things away left and right. And I've seen other towns kind of organize like an almost one day, one weekend flea market. But it's, you know, when you think about your shredding days, like, those are appreciated. I know a lot of classes in school do it, but let's think about that, of maybe we do a one day, you know, exchange, and maybe it's a one day where you don't have to get a pass to deposit your items. But if you miss that day for a year, then there's a fee involved. Because I do think, you know, it is yeah, anyway, just creative problem solving and making changes, but also partnering with what people are already doing in town. So just something to think about. But thank you, because I do, everyone gets really excited about all these things, and, you know, Black Earth composting and the pumpkin throw, that they didn't get to do the throw this year, but people got to recycle their pumpkins. And I know Julie has how many pounds were saved from the landfill from that. It's great to just see some of these things being put in place. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Joe, just a follow-up question. Because I think we're voting between option A and option B, correct, Steve?
Correct.
Okay, so if someone didn't have the $20 to pay, I assume that they could speak to someone at DPW. Because I imagine a lot of us, if we're buying, you know, you try to recycle within your own house, but if you need to get rid of that bed or that couch because you bought a new one, the $20 will not be onerous for many people in Wakefield. It certainly could be onerous for folks who are clearing out a house or you know, is there a way that they could have a conversation and explain that this might be a little tricky?
Yeah, I don't think our standpoint is, you know, we're here to serve and to help the residents. We're certainly not, we're not here to be an obstacle, right? So much like anything else that we talked about, if, you know, someone needed to come have a a private conversation with us, we're more than willing to try to work with them to make sure, we handle business, but in a way that is not overly burdened to someone to the point where, it affects every other facet of the day to day.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Ed,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, but in fairness, a $20 charge, if you don't pay it, then you're violating the mandate, right? I mean, like that's it just, you'll get ticketed, et cetera, if you have stuff out in front of your property that you've not called for.
it just won't get picked up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are we gonna want that though? I mean, that's a bigger issue, don't you think?
Right. Right. I don't see that now, but you still have to make arrangements to have something picked up. They don't just drive around and stop at every house. So there's a proactive move that someone has to do to have something picked up. And I've seen things on my street that have sat out there, and I've explained to my neighbors, no, you have to call. And they didn't realize that. But I understand that I think for a lot of folks, it is something that is manageable and expected. However, I also appreciate that if someone had difficulty coming up with that, I have confidence that Joe and his team could work out something with them, or, understand where the other person was coming from so they could still get something picked up and perhaps not have to pay. But that's a vote, it'll be a vote of the council, whether we go with option A, that does not have the $20 bulk item fee, and then option B that does. Any further discussion on that? Okay, so we can just take the options one by one, I guess. Steve, does that make sense?
Yes.
Any other way? Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could interrupt for a second. Steve, do we want to talk about the third warrant?
I think I'll do the third one last, because this is,
Okay.
yeah,
Gotcha.
after the vote. Yeah.
So if I could please have a motion and a second to approve option A as the 2022 refuse and recycling budget warrant article that represents a request of $2,284,011 for the refuse, recycling, and yard waste budget. That does not include the $20 bulk item fee. A motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Moved by Ed. Seconded by Maureen. Any further discussion?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I do think that there are opportunities and ways to be creative here. I don't think that this is it. I think the amount is too high, and I think that the scope is too broad. I think this is something that is worthy of further analysis, but at this point in time, and in our current economic environment, especially, I think there are a lot of reasons why this is not the time or the narrowly focused sort of consideration that we should be implementing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, so a vote for option A. Julie?
No.
Maureen?
No.
Ed?
Aye.
Jonathan?
No.
Paul?
No.
Peter?
Yes.
And myself, no. So option A fails in that vote, a 5-2 vote. Moving on to option B. Should the town council choose to install a bulk item fee for curbside pickup, the recommendation would be $2,199,441. This represents a budget offset based on the $20 bulk item fee, similar to the current white good and CRTV pickup fee. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Moved by Julie, seconded by Jonathan. Julie? Yes.
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Ed?
No.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Peter?
No.
And Anne? Yes. So option B passes 5-2. Just distracted for a moment. Okay. Joe, moving on to the next article.
Yes, the last one.
You do want to take, before you jump to that, you
Oh,
do,
sorry.
you do need to take a vote on the eminent domain article. I know it's only $1, but
No, I saw that. Sorry about that. I need a motion and a second to approve the eminent domain article to appear at the town meeting.
So moved.
Jonathan moved, Paul seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Julie,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for that.
thank you. On the third DP, I'll jump in on this, Joe, since
Go ahead.
I co-opted it from you. So, Joe had originally come to Kevin and I with a third article, and this article was to supplement the DPW budget because of that horrible, I'll call it a tornado, because that's what it kind of was, that came through the town at the end of August there, or September 1st, whatever that date was. And if you looked at the DPW budget, you noticed on the forestry and parks expenditures for tree removal, equipment rental, we had budgeted $25,000 for the year, and that jumped up to $182,000. And that is entirely due to that horrible microburst or tornado that we had. And Joe and Ann and their crew did a fabulous job, because we were open way before a lot of communities were, because they did go out and help the homeowners and make sure the roads opened up. But that cost money, that cost emergency equipment that we didn't have. So we will have an article at town meeting to cover that. It'll be covered by free cash. However, when Kevin and I were talking, and particularly with this kind of crazy COVID time that we're in, and we're hoping to get, we're promised we're getting financing coming in from FEMA, from the CARES Act, and we've received a lot. But it could be that some of it doesn't come in time to balance our books. So Kevin and I decided that we would co-opt that. It won't just be for DPW, it'll be for all town budgets. We did something similar last year in the beginning of COVID, and that will be the same article that we'll do here. The bulk of it will be for the DPW, and I will have a number prior to town meeting, but we do need that on the warrant. So I think that I would just ask for approval to put it on the warrant, because I don't have the exact number yet, because I have challenged Joe to whittle away as much as he can of that within his existing budget. He's smiling there, looking at me. But we do need to have that on the warrant. So really, all I'll be looking for is the approval to put that on the warrant, and we'll come back with the final number later on when we have it.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions to Steve on that matter? Jonathan?
Just a quick question. So is the approval you're asking for just the approval to go ahead with drafting the warrant article? Presumably, we would then sort of approve the warrant itself when
Yeah, right, exactly. I want that on the warrant.
Okay, I'm just asking just because we don't have anything kind of tangible in front of us. So,
right.
I want to make sure that we're not actually, what we're voting on is not to be interpreted as voting on a specific set of text, a specific number, but kind of the go ahead to make sure that that gets drafted.
Exactly.
Okay.
While we had Joe here, I wanted to handle that.
Excellent. Any further questions or discussion by council members? Seeing none, can I have a motion and a second to post, to present?
And frankly, and I'm happy to go with consensus on that, so that's fine.
Okay.
We're going to vote on it when you vote on the warrant. Anyway.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think
All
Joe's dismissed. Are you? No, you got to stay for the next one, Joe.
Do I?
Yeah.
All right, I'll stay.
So the next article is the stretch code warrant article.
Yes.
All right. I'm giving that to you, Steve.
I'm giving it to Counselor Julie Smith Galvin.
Sounds good.
That's
Tag, you're it.
Okay, we're gonna go through this presentation fairly quickly. You've seen it before. It's essentially an update. What we're talking about is a warrant article for the stretch code, which is, do I have the ability to move this? Let's see. Yeah, which will be part of our application, our ability to make an application to the state for a green community designation. And as we've talked about a number of months ago, that's a designation that puts us into a grant program to achieve certain energy use and environmental achievements across municipal buildings and municipal fleets and whatnot. So there's 271, you can go to the next slide. There's about 271 towns already that already have the designation. I'm not going to go through all this. Next slide. So there's about 271 towns that already have it. So we're coming to the game a bit late, which is not unusual for municipal towns that have municipal utilities. But now we have figured out a way that we can make an application. And so the next slide is really, I believe, well, this is, we've put together a working group. So you may remember that the Environmental Sustainability Committee formally voted to work towards making an application. And the next step was to put together a working group. We've been meeting monthly, made up of representatives from all of these departments. So the next slide. So in order to make an application, there are 5 criteria. We have been through each of them in great detail. I've highlighted the ones here that need additional actions, but we've determined essentially that we already have zoning that would qualify for renewable energy facilities. And that's not necessarily generation facilities, it also includes research and development. And so we believe that we have that covered given our existing zoning. In addition, we already have an expedited permitting process for renewable energy facilities. I don't know whether Tom's on, but he can correct me if I'm wrong about that. There's a few things that we need to document, but we believe that we can get there. The third is the creation of a town energy reduction plan, which first requires a baseline, which is a fairly heavy lift, but the WMGLD working together with the DPW is working on that. And I think we're going to get there. We've gotten access to the software that the state uses, and we're working closely with the state to get that. Once we get the baseline in place, we'll have to come up with a plan to reduce our municipal energy usage by 20%. So we're going to be looking for community ideas on that. Certainly a new high school would help us get there. Many communities use street lighting. We've already done our street lighting work, so we're going to be looking for other ways to meet that requirement. The fourth is an adoption of a fuel efficient vehicle purchase policy, which will come to town council. We'll formalize a town rule around that. There's lots of exemptions for heavy equipment, police vehicles and whatnot, but many other towns have achieved that, and I don't see that to be a huge problem. Excuse me. Number 5 is the adopt the stretch code, which has to be passed by town meeting. I think go to the next slide, which is what we're here to talk about today. Go to the next slide. This is just timing. Oh, maybe I didn't put it in there. So sorry about that. So essentially, there's a stretch code that is a Massachusetts standard. Every other community that's doing this, it would cover new commercial buildings and new residential buildings of a certain size. Pull up my notes here. It does not include renovations. It does not include retrofits and things like that. So Joe, I don't know, Ben was going to be here. I don't think he, oh, is Ben here? Oh, good. So we have the great advantage of our new building inspector having been through this in his previous jobs. And he probably can provide a little more information, not only on the technical part of it, but really seeing it in action and what kind of impact it had on development and the town.
Hi. For the record, my name is Benjamin DiCristoforo. I'm the building inspector for the town of Wakefield. So yeah, my last job, I had the previous experience of being in a stretch community. The stretch community poses a couple of advantages for the homeowner. There's a certified HERS rater that basically is a professional, and they're engaged by the new construction, whether it be a homeowner or the developer for new residential structure. And they're engaged, I'm sorry, am I not on? I'm sorry about that. So the HERS rater basically takes control of the job, advises the homeowner for the new construction, and it's a very, very valuable tool or basically professional that can help us in that, to help the homeowner in that matter.
Julie, anything further?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we'll have an opportunity. Obviously, this will come to town meeting. We're going to do some education around it. There's lots of data. It shows cost, benefits, payback time. So my request is just to put it on the warrant.
Paul, I see you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one real quick question. It was mentioned that it would cover new commercial construction and new residential of a certain size. Can someone elaborate on what the trigger is on the size for residential?
I can jump in. It's actually not, it's new residential construction, period.
Right.
On commercial, it's new commercial, period, over 100,000 square feet or over 40,000 feet for conditioned spaces. So I think that if it's over 40,000 square feet for a rehab, that would be on the commercial side.
Yes.
So the answer is that all new home construction would have to comply?
Right. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Ed?
I just asked, so is this a citizen petition? How is this being sponsored?
It can be as a petition from the Environmental Sustainability Committee or from the Town Council.
Okay, I mean, because I don't feel like I'm in a position to really, have much of a position on it. So I don't feel comfortable with the Town Council advancing this along, but I do feel comfortable if it's a citizen petition. I don't have an issue with it going on as a warrant article. Because otherwise, I think if we're putting it on, it seems like we're endorsing it. And I'm not saying I am or I'm not. I frankly just don't understand enough about it to really have a position.
Steve, what do you think? I mean, I don't think it has to be a citizen. I think it could be from the Environmental Sustainability Committee.
It could be, and Tom Mullen can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that any one single member of an appointed or elected board can also put it on.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's correct. Under section 2(7)A of our charter, any elected town officer, including a member of a multiple member body, can put an article on the warrant.
Okay, so just so we're clear, Madam Chair, so who would be sponsoring it? Just so we're on the record with that.
I mean, Julie could be.
I'll sponsor it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
We've done this before. My recollection is in years past.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, in the Environmental Sustainability Committee can kind of speak to it as well. So yeah. I think it's just important we get it on this spring so that we can move forward. And there'll be opportunities to talk about what it means.
Thanks, Julie. Jonathan. Tom, I'm sorry, were you going to say something else, Tom?
No, that's it.
Okay. Jonathan.
I just had a similar sort of process question as to sort of what we were, if we were voting on anything today, but it sounds like effectively if it's either a petition from the ESC or Councilor Smith-Galvin from you specifically, we wouldn't, we would effectively kind of vote on it when we vote on the warrant as a whole in terms of approving it for town meeting.
I think so.
Okay.
I don't see that we have to vote on today because it'll be formalized in the warrant.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
No, okay. Oh, Ed,
I just want to be clear. I am not taking any position on this. My question is just want to process. So that's what I think we've clarified. So Councilor Smith Galvin is bringing it forward. We're not going to vote on it tonight, but it is going to be part of the warrant. Is that we'll be voting on at a later date? Do I have that correct?
That's fine, yes.
so,
Or we can vote on it now. I don't care. I'm not in charge, obviously, but I'm just asking. I just want to just make sure that just process wise.
so my understanding, it's getting late, so I'm getting a little fuzzy, I think. And I agree with Ed. Certainly pushing an article forward doesn't mean we agree with it. We've all seen that in recent weeks. And we've also put citizen petitions forward that we may not have agreed with, but they follow the process and we push it forward. So does it make sense for us to vote on it tonight? We're not endorsing it. It's simply Julie is making a motion as a member of the town council to place the stretch code warrant article in our town warrant. Julie, do you want to move forth tonight on that, or do we need to do it at another time?
Sure, let's move forth.
Jonathan.
I was just going to say, I wonder, and again, this is not taking a position one way or the other, but I do wonder, given that we don't actually have sort of an article to vote on tonight, if maybe the outcome of tonight is similar to what we just talked about in terms of the article that Mr. Mayo mentioned, more sort of a consensus of the group that we would want to go forward with, again, the ESC or Councilor Smith Galvin proposing this for the warrant that we then vote on at a later date. I'm still fuzzy on what this stretch code actually is, and there's a lot more research that I want to do to understand it.
That makes perfect sense, Jonathan. Let's do that. So let's hold off, can come forth with a little more detailed information, and then we'll vote on it at the next meeting. Sounds good.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm probably being dense just at the late hours.
No. And yeah, my apologies. I didn't realize the whole thing got in there, but it's very well drafted by Mr. Mullen, and we will walk through it in much more detail.
Sounds great. Thank you. All righty. I think we're good to move on to, I see Lieutenant Joe Anderson waiting patiently in the wings for item 10, traffic advisory recommendation. Lieutenant Anderson, I will throw it your way.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Hi, everybody. Lieutenant Joe Anderson, Traffic Advisory Chair. We held a meeting on February 19th, and we request that the first parking space on Princess Street near Main Street be restricted to 15-minute parking. This was a request from a local business owner. The current restriction there is 2-hour parking. The square has a total of 5 15-minute spots as it stands right now. On the west side of Main Street, there are 3 15-minute spaces from Main Street at the post office down to farmland. The east side currently has 2 15-minute spaces. We would look to increase the east side of Main Street, even though this one will be on the corner of Princess Street, to 3 available 15-minute spaces. I think with the increase in online orders, to-go orders, things that have changed since COVID, and some of the more quick service businesses in the square, it makes sense to have an equal number on that side. And having them right around the corners helps our parking enforcement to identify violators that are well over the 15 minutes a little more easily. If they're kind of mixed into the 2-hour parking, it makes it difficult for people to find those spaces, and makes it difficult to enforce. So this would be right on the corner of Princess Street and Main Street. There's a bunch of businesses I think could benefit from having a spot such as this, and it would be right along with the other 15-minute spaces in the square. That's kind of the restriction there. It's either a 15-minute space or a 2-hour parking space, unless you get out further to the 4-hour or merchant spaces. I think you're still muted.
You muted, Ann.
See, happens twice. Thank you, Lieutenant Anderson. Any questions for Lieutenant Anderson on this suggestion? All right, Ed. Oh, you're muted.
On the
Exit
other side,
mute, Doug.
on the other side of the street, so one vehicle happened on the sidewalk. Did that get ticketed?
That was my
So
question.
if there was more discussion, I was going to say, you can see how in the photo I provided, there was somebody probably going in for less than 15 minutes and decided to park on the sidewalk. So yeah, that's a good eye. Good eye.
I think it's just a good plug that the Envision project is actually expecting making that one way and then having parking on both sides of the street. Clearly, there's a demand for it from what we're seeing in this photo.
Definitely.
All right, if I could, any more questions? If I could please have a motion and a second that the first parking space on Princess Street near Main Street be restricted to 15-minute parking.
So moved.
Moved by Paul, seconded by
Second.
Ed. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Jonathan?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And Paul?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Anderson, as always.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, item number 11. We have licenses, 2 license requests, outdoor public space usage, and then a Boston outdoor recreation. Steve, I'm going to throw this to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Way back when in June of 2020, the Wakefield Town Council was very gracious and I think very showed a lot of foresight in allowing outdoor dining in Wakefield during the pandemic. And we certainly did see a number of our businesses from the Rockery all the way to Greenwood and in between that took advantage of it. And actually they ended up doing quite well. And I think the townspeople really enjoyed it. And DPW did a great job. And we actually learned a lot about how we can, if we took this in the future, we could make this better. Well, the governor's order that allowed this to happen, he extended it later in the year. I believe it was either 60 or 90 days after he orders the pandemic over or states it's over. So certainly this is appropriate right now. My office has received, Erin Kokinda has received, and I think some of the councilors have received a lot of calls and interest from a lot of local restaurants and businesses who want to come out to the street, want to come out to public spaces. Seems like we've seen this in almost every single forum we've done. And we did 3 of them last week, and the use of the outdoor spaces for either dining or business or what have you. What I'd like to do, with the permission of the council was very gracious to give town administrator's office and the DPW office kind of authority to pull this together, that we do reach back out to our businesses out there, many of whom have told us that they're anxious to go and buy some better outdoor tables, umbrellas, things like that. I think last year they just kind of used what they have, but they're ready to buy equipment and do this, and that we work out areas that make sense and that are safe for everybody and are sensitive to everybody's needs and uses. We've also spoken with the art department at the high school, and we're going to try to incorporate the students a little bit. If we can't get some nicer barriers, that they actually come and paint our barriers nicely. And Erin's working on that right now. So really what I'd like is the council to allow me to go out and make this offer to the business owners and then work with DPW like we did last year. So I'm open to any questions. Ann's muted.
I'm so conscious of not being loud while someone else is talking. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, real quickly, we touched bases on this the other day. If the businesses that are approached that wish to come out want to put up their own form of barrier, are they going to be allowed? I mean, I did a little research and based upon comments from our own board, Middleton had some great outdoor setups. Somerville had, Cambridge had. It doesn't always, are we restricted to use just Jersey barriers? That's the question.
No, we're not, as long as it's, our DPW feels it's safe and it would be protective, absolutely. That we could be used, and also people come to their own lots and they can use whatever they want, obviously.
True, okay, so there is some flexibility between the owner and the DPW and yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, no, that's good, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Jonathan?
Just really briefly, entirely supportive of this plan. And I just want to say, I love the idea of asking the students at the high school to think about using this as a canvas for public art. I think that's a great example of, kind of making lemonade out of lemons. And so whoever, Steve, if that was you or anyone else at Town Hall who came up with it, great idea, and glad to see that move forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Maureen?
Yeah, I agree. I love, I'm going to keep on pushing for more public art, and that counts as public art. And I'm going to soon convince Steve that we're going to do some of the walls in town too, but we'll start with the barriers. I think that's a great first step. I think I'm just going to do my plug, Steve, like you and DPW and Erin will figure this out. But I just think something missing a little bit last year that I asked for, that I think like, let's expand, is having places that aren't restaurant specific. So like, you could take a coffee from somewhere, and again, like the front of the Greenwood School, if you go get takeout from Feng's or Tequila's and cross the street, and maybe think about some like ways that aren't restaurant specific and more like, you take ice cream from Cravings and walk, and there's some seating outside. So just to think more about that, because I do think people travel, but they're looking for kind of seating that isn't with one specific restaurant.
Yep, noted. Yep, we're looking into that. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Julie?
Well, just proof that Maureen and I think the exact same way. I was gonna say the same thing, but just add that I know Melrose did some parklet type things, so maybe utilizing more common space or thinking about building something like that. But I agree, we definitely need something that's not restaurant specific.
I don't know if we think the same way, or we both just eat a lot of ice cream. We want
ice cream and coffee.
And eat our ice cream is what it really is.
Thanks.
I have a spot in mind for a parklet, so.
Excellent. Ed?
I just think it's really important we get moving on this, because businesses are trying to place these orders now, and they have some turnaround time. I know some businesses will be ready by the end of this week, probably with the weather as it is. So
they might be out there tomorrow.
Right. But I think it worked really well, Mr. Mayo. When Mr. Mayo and DPW, you took the reins with that. I think we should just bestow that authority upon them again in the same way. It was, I think, a very efficient way of dealing with it, and they worked really well with the businesses too. So I'd encourage us moving forward with the vote on that.
Sounds good. I am guessing we were all on board for this. So if I could please have a motion and a second to give Steve worldwide domination and license to work with the DPW on outdoor public space usage. How does that sound, Ed? Good?
It's pretty close, I guess. But do we need to set a timeline for this? Do we want to set a time parameter through the fall? I mean, do we want to do through December 1st? I mean,
it is they'll all sign I would agree. Maybe.
Yeah.
The council can always revoke. We made a revocable license, but it might be good to have an end date on that.
I mean, I would be fine doing till even December 1 or December 31 for that matter. And then why don't we just do the end of the year? So if I may friendly amend the motion, Madam Chair.
I agree with you, because if businesses are going to be investing some money, some might bring out heaters that will allow that to happen. So
stroll. I mean, there's like a lot.
Sure.
Yeah,
so
I don't anticipate this actually coming to the street before April 1st.
Okay.
And so maybe that would be the time that you could give me. I mean, some might want to, but I'm not so sure. We could still get snow. There could be issues. April 1st is probably even too tight, but.
Yep. So why don't we amend the motion to allow for outdoor public space usage running from April 1st to December 31st, allowing town administrator to work with DPW for the details of that.
So moved.
Moved by Ed,
Second.
seconded by Jonathan. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Myself, yes. Jonathan,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Maureen,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Paul.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Second, on the licenses is Boston Outdoor Recreation. And I see we have some folks from the business here. Steve, do you want to begin with this?
Yeah, I'll just give a little bit of background on that, and I'll turn it over to, is it Cole I'm turning this over to? Okay. Where this came from, because there's a little bit of history here. Back in 2008, end of 2008, beginning of 2009, economy was horrible. We were, people right now get concerned about 1 or 2 empty storefronts. We probably had 10 downtown between Albion Street and Main Street. So a group of citizens got together and to talk about things they could do to bring some vibrancy to Wakefield. And one of the items that this group came up with was bringing canoeing or boating or paddle boarding or whatever on the lake. And this group, Outdoor Recreation, approached us. And so in 2009, they started operating on the lake, first with just canoes, and then they went into paddle boards and paddle boats and what have you. They later put a dock in. And for the most part, people seemed very happy with it and enjoyed the ability to come out here and paddle around the lake. And our thought was hopefully that, these people would migrate down Main Street and buy an ice cream and maybe sit in one of our parklets now. So over the years, it has grown, and we have normally had a 3-year contract. Not that it has to be 3 years, not that the town council needs to give a contract at all, but that's what we've normally done. We have not had any issues from my standpoint, with the exception of last couple of years, and a couple of those speakers spoke tonight. So the people from Outdoor Recreation are here to discuss their operation. We do have at some point kind of a picture of the area that they have been using. It's not a great picture. It's not a great, but something that we had on the contract. So they can start, and I'm ready to answer any questions. So why don't I, okay with you, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Cole.
Of course. Cole, if you could just identify yourself and then speak to the proposed contract.
Evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Cole Trainer. I'm the general manager of Boston Outdoor Recreation, also known as Boating in Boston. As the town manager, Stephen Mayo, pointed out, we've been operating in Wakefield since about 2008, 2009. We offer outdoor recreation to park goers, to residents of Wakefield, and folks passing through Wakefield. Anyone taking a stroll is welcome to rent one of our boats. Our passion really is getting as many people out on the water and enjoying the freedom that comes with boating as possible. As he touched upon, we rent canoes, kayaks, supboards, which are stand-up paddle boards, pedal boats as well. We did put in a dock a few years ago to further advance to rent pedal boats a little more effectively. We have a few boat racks and the shed that's there. We have been very gracious to operate in the park in the town of Wakefield. It's clear from listening to this meeting that the residents of Wakefield are very concerned about the way the park looks and the way it's treated by our company in particular. And I do want to apologize for the lack of responsiveness previous managers had for the last 2 or 3 years or so in removing the equipment from the property as is required by the contract. I was lucky enough to take over as general manager of Boating in Boston in the fall of 2019. And I was able to meet with town manager Stephen Mayo and discuss some of those concerns that Julie Scott, I believe, thank you very much for bringing those up here in the meeting. We always like to hear how we can do better and how we can further succeed. So any more concerns or questions, please feel free to send them our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Does any member of the council have any questions for Mr. Trainer? Jonathan.
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Trainer, first of all, appreciate you coming and sort of acknowledging, I think, the concerns that residents have had before. You know, I think that goes a long way to, you know, I hope showing your company's kind of commitment to, you know, hearing the issues that have been raised. Can you talk a little bit about, from a process standpoint, you know, how you would see addressing those issues on a go-forward basis? You know, in terms of, you know, use of the space that's granted to the license, some of the overuse that's been cited in terms of picnic tables and other things, removal of equipment on the site, things like that.
Yes, thank you for your question. According to the contract, we do need to, at the start of the season, cart in all of our equipment, and at the end of the season, cart out all of our equipment. So that does include the boat racks, it includes the docks, it includes every single boat, as well as the picnic tables themselves. Does that answer your question? Well, to the land use part of the question, we're located just next to the playground at the Lower Commons, I believe the area is called. We use kind of a small slot next to that playground, and we're responsible for cleaning trash and such off the shoreline for probably 300 feet to the right and left of where we're located.
Yeah,
here's the picture here.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say that answers, I think, some of the question. I guess the other part of the question, or this may be more of a comment, you know, Mr. Mayo, as we think about sort of what the next contract would look like. It does seem like there's been maybe a lack of clarity around, you know, things like placement of the picnic tables, you know, restoration of some of the, you know, kind of the grass and things like that. I would maybe suggest, as we think about whether or not to move forward with a license from a contract standpoint, we look at some areas, some things like that where we can, you know, tighten up and make sure that the, you know, the language in the contract is clear in terms of both the town's expectations and any, you know, possible remediation that needs to happen.
Thank you, Jonathan. Julie.
I definitely agree with everything that Jonathan said. And Cole, thank you for coming and acknowledging it. In terms of what was raised in public participation, and I may need to be reminded what's in the bench, I don't even know whether it's not a bylaw, but the bench kind of protocols that we put together. So is that just a time period to look through before anything is placed? How would that work?
I think if you wanted to follow that, the bench, lake bench structure procedure, I guess it's called. It would be a 30-day comment period.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That doesn't seem like a bad idea. I guess I also kind of wonder how this lines up with our policy about the use of the common. I know that we've put some like cost recovery type things in there for things that use electricity and whatnot. So I guess I would be interested to know how that lines up. And then the third thing would be just, I had never really thought about other outfits coming in and wanting to put their boats in, and you know, what kind of exclusivity, if any, is there to do so, at least in that area that we're licensing. So those would be the three issues, and I do think it's probably worth taking some time to think about it.
Yeah, I don't think that any of the other companies that were mentioned, why they have come forward a few times over the years and requested permission to have a boat day, they did not use this area at all. Okay. And I don't recall them having that in years gone by, in recent history. So there may have been someone that jumped in at the head of the lake that we didn't know about, and maybe they did go down there or jump off from behind, I'm gonna say Lord Wakefield and really date myself, but behind Wakefield Office Park, but we did not grant anything in the last few years. I can't remember. We have in years gone by, but not recently. Sherry, do you remember any? I can't remember any in recent years.
Yeah, I don't remember any either.
Okay.
So this would be for that area. I mean, it would be revocable permit, but it would be for their use.
Paul. Oh, I'm sorry, Julie, were you done?
No, I mean, I would just say, and I haven't been through the contract in great detail, is just, we may want to think about some sort of like escrow as well to make sure that everything's returned to a certain level, expected level. That's all I have.
Paul, then Ed, then Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So based upon what I've just heard right now, can someone please lay out a timeline as to when we can fully discuss this? Are we looking at giving them the 30-day period to review this, as Mr. Conley asked for? And then it will come back before the board to make a decision based upon the comments as far as the contract is concerned? How is this working out?
Yeah, I think what I would suggest is that from what I'm hearing is that there are concerns about the placement of picnic tables.
Yes.
Remediation, and I think when Dennis went through that, he didn't really feel there was anything that was that bad, but we certainly do have a damages clause in there, and they do have insurance. They provide us insurance every year. I might ask them to give me a sketch of where they plan to put their picnic tables, if they're gonna put picnic tables, and that the council might want to limit that to a number. And I would love to come back within 30 days to present to get comments from other people and to put a contract. So if the council so decides, get it to you ahead of time after working with Cole, but seeing if the council wants to go forward with this.
So my only
30 days from today for people to comment.
So my only concern, as I mentioned, is I would prefer doing a yearly contract rather than a 3-year contract. So when we do have our discussion, I'd like to have some consideration as to having weighing both sides of that coin when it comes down to. But I think we should at least address Julie Scott and Bill Conley's concerns in regards to how we proceed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Trader. I think that the idea of having this kind of facility is a tremendous amenity to the lake. So I'm fully in support of that. I think, the idea of losing it would obviously be a concern. As I understand it, the town doesn't receive any sort of payment from this company. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And have we gone out to, have we looked at other companies that would potentially be interested? So we had a more competitive process, or perhaps a company that even offered more expanded, offerings than what the current company?
We have not.
Okay. I just don't know whether it makes sense for us to explore that. I mean, again, I think this is a tremendous amenity if it's done right. Mr. Trainer, I know you're newer into the process. In the company, I just think that there have been, I have heard a number of resident concerns, over the years with the way that things have been managed. And I know that that's not your fault. You're new to this, but it's the company's reputation we're talking about. And so I don't know whether it makes sense for us to in any way explore perhaps other options in addition to this one company, just to make sure we have the best fit. But at a minimum, I do think that it's important for us to have a clearly delineated contract that talks about recourse available to us. I think a 3-year term is fine as long as we have the ability to terminate it at any point, which we would. So I think 1 year is probably not necessary. But I can just say, Mr. Trainer, that the lake is the crown jewel of Wakefield for many people, many residents, and people come from near and far to make use of the lake. And there is an incredible sensitivity that is absolutely warranted to make sure that everything that is done along the lake, especially along the shoreline, is done with a certain respect for the natural beauty that is there. And that respect has not often been shown in recent years from some people's perspectives. And I would just say that, you know, on behalf of the people that I've heard from on this, I would just ask that you really be mindful of that, because that's something that, you know, if we go forward, it matters to people. The lake matters a lot to people, and kind of haphazardly managing a facility on the lake shores is not something that's going to be well received by this community, and ultimately it's bad business. So I would just really encourage you to recognize that, and I leave it up to this body, but I don't think it's a bad thing to explore if there are other, you know, companies that are interested in perhaps providing a similar service. And again, this is a $0 lease right now too, and so I think it's something for us to be mindful of. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I actually think that there's maybe some homework, Mr. Mayo, that I would ask you and your team to do before we have a more definitive proposal come back for this body. And I would say that for that sort of 30-day comment period clock to start, I guess I would like to see, you know, I think some more specifics around, again, a sketch of the area, what we'd be looking at in terms of very specifically, you know, kind of, you know, what would be put in place and how that would be maintained. I also agree with Councillor Dombrowski. I do think that there's value in, you know, looking at other options to see, you know, who else might be interested in offering boating at this part of the lake, and what other amenities they might be willing to offer or other compensation to the town. And so I would maybe ask, you know, Mr. Mayo, if we could look at those two things in parallel over the course of the next few weeks, maybe come back to this council with sort of a recommendation and more specifics, and then kind of adhere to the bench policy that we have in place and allow some time for public comment. I know that sort of stretches this out a little bit from a timing standpoint, and my intention is not to suggest that we do, you know, a 6-month RFP process or anything like that, but I think there are enough sort of questions and concerns that residents have raised and folks on this council have raised that it maybe warrants a little bit more time and diligence.
Okay, so we can certainly go out for an RFP and take it from there.
Yeah.
Maureen.
Yeah, I just as the counselor who sat on the Steve, what did you call it? Bench policy and structures committee. I think, you know, the point of that was when things going to go into town, even if they're not permanent, just to let people, both sides, like all sides, everyone weigh in. I know as many people enjoyed community boating. I actually have a gift card that somebody gave me last year that I still need to use. So whether it's Wakefield or Stoneham, I need to use that. So I think the 30 days is just good for people to tell us what they thought, and then we can kind of, you know, Steve, you can work with Cole about just, you know, making sure things are where they're supposed to be and kind of get cleaned up in a timely manner. I think that was a lot of the concern that we heard about last year, but everyone, you know, I'm hoping to get out on a paddle board at some point this summer on the lake. So, but as someone who worked on that policy, it'd be good just to kind of use it. It's a great opportunity to put it in place.
Thank you, Maureen. And just to be clear, I think the 30-day in public engagement is not to see if we want to have this. We want to have this. It's just how we have it and how we implement it. I just want the public to be clear on that too. It's not a rethinking whether or not to have it at all. So Steve, does it make sense? And Cole, again, thank you for coming and thank you for being validating Julie's comments. Does it make sense? Can we do a little homework in a couple of weeks or a few weeks, and you can come back to another meeting, which still, you know, I don't want to push it out too far because the 30 days, you don't want that to run into the season.
Well, I will say this, if we do go out for an RFP process, that's
Right.
open to the world.
No,
right?
absolutely. Ed.
I maybe just suggest that we start like the 30-day process now just to get input, and then almost simultaneous with the RFP, because the ultimate contract that we sign off on can be reflective of the feedback we've gotten from the community. But I think that's probably the tightest way of getting us, because we want to get on the water this spring. We want people to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, Ed. I think putting it out for public comment about what their ideas are of what they've seen in the past, what they would like to see. Because if we put it out for an RFP, I don't want this going into June and we don't have anybody yet. Or for Cole's company to go to another venue because we've lost them. So I think giving folks 30 days, starting, whenever, starting Monday, makes sense. Jonathan may disagree, but here we go.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's fine to open comment now. I guess
Okay.
I would just like for us as a body to kind of reserve the right to extend that comment period based on what we find over the next few weeks. So, if let's say if we do an RFP and someone comes up with like a radically different proposal that is kind of a large departure from what we've done historically, I would just want to make sure that we give ourselves and give our residents the time to weigh in on that. So, certainly I have no concern about starting public comment now. And I do hope people avail themselves of that. I just want to make sure that we don't artificially close the door after 30 days if, we find that the options in front of us look different than we think they might today.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. We can always come in, tweak time periods and adjust that. I think with a council motion, I assume we could do that. Ed.
I would also just add that if we in fact end up going with a contract that has no lease or any other financial benefit to the town, one thing to consider would perhaps be having a resident discounted rate for use of the watercraft, whereas those from out of town would be paying a higher price because it is all of our property that they'd be using. And so I think the fact that the townspeople are able to derive some kind of benefit from that is something that I think should be considered by anybody who would suggest. I would suggest a motion where we say that the public comment period ends on April 8th and that an RFP goes out as soon as possible with a return date, Mr. Mayo, I imagine prior to that, if that's consistent with what you've done in the past.
That's tight.
That might be tight. Tom Mullen, I think that's tight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because of the 30B. Okay, but we'll, as close as we can, Ed, we'll get it out as quick as we can.
I just don't want to see us, obviously, to Madam Chair's point, lose, a season here either.
So the motion is to open public comment with regard to structures similar to that have been placed around the boating company by the boating company, or folks' ideas about that. Again, not public comment on whether it should happen. That will occur through April 8th. And then, Steve, the RFP is just something you can work on. I don't think we need a date on that because it needs to be
yeah, we're going to try
workable.
to get it in as quick as we can. If possible, we could get it in Wednesday. We'll work on it tomorrow. They've got to be in there on Wednesday. So.
That's quick. Any further comments? All right. Seeing none, we'll take that. Do we need a motion? Well, I guess to open the public comments. So motion and a second to open public comments on licensing Boston Outdoor Recreation or another company potentially to do a similar it's 10 of 10 people. Help me with the word I'm looking for. Similar.
So, Madam Chair, I'll move to open a public comment period with regard to bringing in a third party to provide community boating services at the lake.
Oh, so much better than what I just said, Jonathan. Excellent. Can someone second that, please?
Second.
Awesome. Let's vote. Myself, yes. Jonathan?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Ed?
Aye.
Maureen?
Yes.
Tom? Oh, no, Tom doesn't vote. You're just next to me. You're next to Maureen. I'm still thinking I have to drive home from Boston. Paul?
Yes.
And Peter?
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Cole, for coming, and we look forward to seeing you or hearing from.
Thank you for having me.
Did we lose Ann?
We lost Ann.
Yeah, I think so. She's connecting again.
There we go.
Yeah, you're muted, Ann. Maybe not.
Disconnecting.
Julie, you might be up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So the next item is a acceptance of a gift to the Human Rights Commission in the amount of $1,306.76. Oh, there she is.
All right.
Oh, she can't hear.
Can't hear you, Ann, no. Why don't you keep going with the
Oh,
vote?
she's gone. Okay, so do I have a motion to accept?
So
So moved. Second.
So moved by Jonathan, seconded by Paul. Roll call votes. Maureen,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Ed,
Aye.
Peter,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
myself, yes. I guess
I'm
we
back.
don't have Ann.
She's back.
No, I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you accept the donation to the HRC, Ann?
I do, yes.
Excellent. Okay, back to you.
Okay. I went to move a paper and I changed my screens and everything went, it was a kerfuffle. All righty. Now, thank you, Julie, for stepping in. Good practice. Item 13, town-owned land. Discussion regarding Butler Avenue. Paul, I think this is your baby.
Yeah, my baby. This is gonna be real quick. A lot has changed over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So if we can get the WCAT to put up the PowerPoint, then we can start from there. Thank you very much. First, I want to make a disclaimer to the public. What you are seeing now has not been approved. They're just options. I don't want anyone to think that plans have been submitted to any degree. This is just the council discussing options for the potential reuse of the Wood subdivision on Butler Ave. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So just a background, bit of that background information. Voters at the November 2020 town meeting approved the acquisition of land in single resident district located at 94 Butler Ave as a part of a legal settlement. Property was subdivided in 2017. It's currently listed as a 16-lot subdivision of land with roadways labeled Butler Woods. It consists of approximately 11 acres of land, which has approximately 2 acres of that land that needs to be capped. Next photo, please. So here is a photo of the approved plan from 2017. It shows the locations of the 16 houses that were approved by the planning board prior to them going onto the site and moving soil around. Next slide, please. Picture, please. This is a rendering of where the wetland delineation is in the bright green on the far left, and the delineation of the potential area that will be capped. The area was given by a drawing from our DPW, and that's as much land as would not be classified as buildable on the lot. Next shot, please. So exploring options on this, there are several that we could potentially do moving forward, but it's going to be up to this council to make a decision on what to do one way or the other. So the first option, of course, is that the council can make the decision just to cap the contaminated area and leave the parcel as is. The town recoups no funds to offset the 2.1 million paid for the land. They have another option of to recreate a new subdivision, apply the needed cap, determine the number of buildable lots remaining, and place that plan out to bid as a ready-to-build site. The town then recoups their money. Next photo, please. This photo shows which lots of the original approved plan would potentially not be able to be built due to the capped area. So you went from a 16 lot subdivision to potentially having 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lots. So the 6 lots potentially will be removed due to the fact that there's a detention tank that would be directly underneath the cap area, so that would not be able to be maintained in that location. Next shot, please. Options continued. One of the other options right now is that this council could vote to change the zoning of the land from single residence to general residence. What this would do is it would open it up to greater density. Variances would be needed for development, and there's a potential for a proposal 40B development on the site at that point. Next photo, please. So these photos here are what we all saw originally a while ago. And this is just one rendering that that was produced by another individual as potential of what it could look like if you change the zoning from single to general residence. There's a major drainage concern with this much density on the site. So it's something that would have to be worked out. Next shot, please. This is another rendering where it's even more density because it's attached dwellings on the site. And again, the same issue occurs. This is again going from single residence to general residence. Variances would have to be granted because you're going down to 8,000 square foot lots. And again, it could be used for 40B development, which would greatly intensify the density if that was the case. Next photo, please. Another option is to create an attached dwelling overlay district. This is would utilize the land as a potential 55 plus community under the open space development zoning bylaw 190/93. Next photo, please. So based upon a yield plan, you would determine the number of lots available and you would create an open space design. Until that happens, the number of units allowed on the site is an unknown. But again, you can preserve a lot of the land by doing an open space plan. Next photo, please. Another rendering of the potential, just placing the houses in, creating small lots, and then putting the road in after the fact and drawing your lines. The next shot, please. This is a rendering of what could potentially be used as an ADOD, an attached dwelling overlay district, whereas you create the usable lot only on the site, and each of the lots would contain 1/2 of a duplex. And I believe, again, drainage would be a concern on this, but you would maintain a larger percentage of the overall 11 acres of land as open space. Next shot, please. And again, the questions and comments from the board. My point in all this right now, because I thought I was going to be able to get something in on this town meeting. This is going to fall strictly in the hands of the council now as far as how you move forward. Discussion should be had as to how you want to move forward. Do we want to do anything with the land? We could cap it and just leave it as recreational if that's an option. But personally, I'd like to get the 2.15 back at least. Okay, because I'd rather have that in Steve's hands and then not in Steve's hands. That's a lot of money that we could use back in our coffers. That's my opinion. I'll open it up to give it back to you, Madam Chair. Only to see, I want to hear what my fellow councilors have to say. I'm more interested in what everyone's thoughts are on what they saw, and if they have questions, at least ask them.
Thanks, Paul. I see Jonathan has his hand up.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul, for pulling that together. I'm actually kind of excited about this discussion because I think it's rare that we have sort of the opportunity as a town to really think about what we want in a parcel without constraints, and because we own the land, that's kind of a nice position to be in. Just my own sort of personal opinion is that I would love to see us explore some possibility of doing something around 55 plus housing. I think that's a need there that we see in the town, and I think this is an opportunity for us to think creatively how to do it. With that being said, I wonder if it makes sense for us to think about kind of going through the Vision 2030 process and then maybe kind of opening this up more fully. I mean, again, the nice thing is because we own the land, there's no rush for us to make any decisions. And I think, we're getting some great participation and great feedback from the town in terms of sort of what people want to see and what values they have. And so I wonder if it makes sense for that process to play out and then kind of come back and have a robust discussion, both within this council, but also sort of more publicly as well in terms of where we'd like to go with that space. And I think, Councilor Donaco, I think the work that you've done so far, gives us a really good starting point for all of that, because you've done such a nice job laying out some different ideas and different scenarios that, we can kind of grab feedback on when the time is right.
Thank you, Jonathan. The devil's in the details, though. Just remember that there's been a lot excluded from this discussion because it is late, as the chair has already made comment, and I really don't want to keep you all here, but this discussion could go on for an hour, okay, which we don't have time to do. And she's shaking her head, no, no, no.
No, I think it's a valuable discussion. I just feel like I'm somewhat, and my fellow councilors may also feel somewhat incompetent to talk for an hour about this when we haven't thought about the details and some of the options. And I'm using incompetent simply to say that I haven't let it sink down enough, Paul, but I appreciate you bringing it forward.
No, and I respect that. And I respect that from all of you. I really didn't expect anyone to make a decision tonight, but to be more informed as to what's out there. But I'd be happy to answer anyone's questions as to procedure if they were going with planning board matters. If it goes to the ZBA matters, which is changing it to general residence, I'd pull myself away from it because I don't have the knowledge on that end of it. But if it stays with the planning board, I have to say I helped write the 4 bylaws that pertain to open space. So I can answer some of the questions if the council should ever have questions on it. Anybody else? I mean, on this?
Ed has a question.
I would just say briefly that I think there's no question. You mentioned density. I think there's a general consensus around town that we need to have less density, not more of it. So I think that should be helping to drive our decision making. Certainly, we're not making a decision here tonight, nor would it be appropriate. We need to get plenty of input, obviously. And there's also a lot of consideration for green space within town too, and I respect that. So those from my perspective and from all the folks I've spoken with are two of the driving principles, I think, when we look at development going forward. So yeah, of course, there's plenty of discussion to be had on this, and we need not do it at 10 o'clock tonight. But I think anything that goes in the direction of increasing density really runs counter to what a lot of people are looking for. We need to have less, not more.
Thank you.
Any other comments from counselors at this stage?
And can I
Yes.
jump in? I just wanted to remind the council, and Town Councilor Janarko mentioned this in the beginning, that whatever is done ultimately on this land is going to need, either planning board or ZBA approval, but is also going to need town meeting approval. Because when the town council does come forward with something, a plan to sell the land, that will have to be approved by, I believe, a 2/3 vote of the town meeting. if I'm not mistaken. Town Councilor Mullen is raising his head. So, whatever, this board has certainly a very important role as the custodian of it, but it will ultimately go to town meeting. So there's a lot of homework that will need to be done here. And I think what Paul wanted to do was to get everybody's, ideas cooking on this, so we can come forward with a nice plan together and then, present it to the community. So nice job, Paul, on pulling that together.
Thank you.
Julie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Paul, I really appreciate this because, we knew that we've talked about this parcel for a long time, and just having that visual really gets the conversation started. And I agree with Ed, I think there are some, and Jonathan actually as well, with this visioning process, what we're hearing around town, I think this will be an opportunity for us to apply some of those thoughts.
Thank you, everyone. Greatly appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Paul, I know that was a lot of work, so thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Item number 14, we have a disclosure, receipt of a disclosure of election or appointment as required by 930 Code of Mass Regs 6.023. Tom, do you need to comment on this, or we just accept it in our packet?
Yeah, you have an entirely passive role here. Amy Wall is a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. She is interested in running for the school committee. Under Chapter 268A, Section 20, the worst written statute in the history of man.
It's a big...
Yeah.
Wow, Tom.
It's impenetrable.
Probably a lot of competition for that.
Oh, I mean, I'm going back to the Code of Hammurabi. And it's easier to read the Babylonian original than to read this statute. And I had to call the State Ethics Commission and throw myself on their mercy just to understand the case. But basically, in order to take on this additional position, she needs to make a purely informational disclosure filing with her appointing authority, which is the council.
Excellent. So we all saw that. So thank you, Amy, for following the convoluted code.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
So is the potential conflict, is it the running for school committee as a ZBA member, or would it be the serving on the ZBA if she happens to be elected? I guess I'm confused as to sort of what's the potential conflict that's being reported.
Yeah, that's because you're thinking like an intelligent human being, and
okay.
You've got to put yourself in an entirely different mindset. This statute, Section 20, really try to read it some days. It's entertaining. It basically forbids you from having two contracts with a municipality.
Okay.
Now you may say, well, she doesn't have any contracts with the town and she doesn't want any. It gets complicated. She's regarded as a municipal employee because she's a ZBA member, and she would be a special municipal employee if she were a school committee member. And both of those, or certainly the ZBA position, constitutes a contract within the bizarre meaning of this statute.
Yeah. No, and I get the ZBA sort of as a, yeah, I mean, I know that as town councilors, we're kind of deemed under ethics law to be employees. I guess what I wanted to clarify is that there isn't a conflict today where she is a ZBA member and a candidate for town council. The conflict would come if she is elected to the school committee and decides to retain her position on the ZBA, which presumably she's considering doing if she submitted the conflict of interest form.
Yeah. Were she unfortunate enough to win, then she'd.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I apologize. I just, I was trying to make sure I understood exactly what was being disclosed.
All right. Thank you. Code of Hammurabi. That's a new one for town council lore. I love that. Okay, item number 15, announcements. Does anyone have any announcements considering it's 10:14? But feel free to give the announcements, just maybe with brevity. Jonathan.
Just one question and two very brief announcements. First, a question for Mr. Mayo. Do we have any update on the Broadway crossing and any news from the Federal Railroad Administration about that?
Other than the fact that they are incredibly slow in completing this, we have not received any word that there are any issues. So that's good. It is on somebody's desk over there for approval. And we have also reached out to Senator Markey's office, hoping that he can nudge that along. So I'm ever hopeful.
Okay, and so when I'm going to say when, I know it's probably if, but when we do get the approval,
yes,
which hopefully will be soon, what's the turnaround time for us to open the crossing?
It'll be a matter of a couple of days. We'll just put the island back and then open it up. So it's not, we're ready to run as soon as we can.
Okay, great, thank you. I know I've gotten a lot of questions about that, so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that the wheels of bureaucracy move quickly on that one.
Someone called me and predicted April Fool's Day would be the day that it would be in place. That may be as good a guess as anybody.
All right, just two quick comments. First of all, I just wanted to thank everyone who participated in the first virtual public forum we had for Vision 2030 last Thursday. We had a truly phenomenal turnout, and everyone who attended was really engaged in the discussions. I was particularly kind of energized because in the group that I was helping to facilitate, I had about half a dozen fifth graders that participated from one of our local Girl Scout troops and offered some really great feedback and great participation. So it was just really incredible, and I'm so grateful for everyone who took the time and more importantly, kind of, cared enough to sort of share their opinions and speak up during that forum. We got some great feedback. For anyone who missed it or anyone who attended and has additional feedback, I just wanted to highlight that we do have an online survey that's out, that's going to be open for another 2.5 weeks. That's available on the town's website if you go to the tile on the webpage that says Vision 2030. For anyone who doesn't have online access, we also do have paper copies both at Town Hall as of today, and there'll be some at the Senior Center, I believe, starting tomorrow. So please fill that out. Again, that'll be open for 2.5 weeks. And then in April, we'll have our second virtual public forum, and then have that followed by a second survey that'll be open for a 3-week period. And then we'll do the same thing in June. And each of those two forums will cover a different set of topics. So hope residents keep an eye out for that, and hopefully we'll have continue to have some great turnout in those forums. Finally, just wanted to mention, I do have virtual office hours coming up next Monday from 6 to 7 on Facebook Live. And looking forward to some warmer days so I can go back outside and see people in person. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Julie.
Just quickly, I told the library I'd mentioned that this Thursday at 7 is their continued community commit to your community programming, which is a keynote from Dr. Susan Donaldson, who works for Massachusetts, 350 Massachusetts. I've spoken with her on the phone. She's going to talk about grassroots organizing around climate change issues. So I encourage people to sign up for that. That's all I have.
Thanks, Julie. Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that March is the White Ribbon Campaign Month. I see that Mr. Mayo is wearing his white ribbon, as am I. And just to remind everyone, it's a pledge by men to never commit, condone, or remain silent about violence against women or girls, and or any forms of gender-based violence or discrimination. And I'm working on a little project with a great team from WCAT, Ryan, Ian, and Adam, and just be on the lookout later this month. Some pretty cool stuff going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. I don't see any other counselors. Steve,
I'm good. Thank you.
you're good. All right, Tom, you're good?
All set, thanks.
Excellent. All right. And based on the time, I am also well. Very quickly, any matters not anticipated by the agenda? I'm guessing not. Okay. So if I could have a motion and a second for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Paul. Roll call vote. Myself, yes. Jonathan.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Ed.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
And Peter.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us. And our next town council meeting will be on Monday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. via Zoom. Thank you all for sticking with us. Take care.
Aye.